Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September 23rd, 2023 County Board meeting. This is Board Chair Christian Dorsey presiding, and I'm joined today by colleagues Vice Chair Garvey and board members DeFerranti, Carantonis, and Talento. Thank you for those of you who are joining us here in the boardroom, as well as those who are joining us remotely via Microsoft Teams as part of our hybrid meeting model. We encourage anyone who would need to use a mask to comfortably participate in the meeting here in person. Please feel free to do so. And if you need a mask, we do have them available with our clerk, who is seated to my right, Mr. Kushner. We also will have today, as part of our hybrid meeting model, some members of the public providing testimony remotely, as well as presentations from members of our staff. If you are here in person in the room, we ask when you are recognized to please come up to the lectern. The only thing that you need to do is to adjust it if it's not at a height that is suitable for you. You don't have to do anything with the microphone. It will always be on. And if you are submitting documents as part of your testimony, please hand those to our clerk, Mr. Kushner, and make sure that on each document it includes your name and contact information. For those who are participating remotely today, please keep yourselves muted and your cameras off until you are recognized to speak. If you are using the phone, you can unmute by using *6, that mutes and unmutes. And if you are using Microsoft Teams on an app or a browser, you just click the microphone button on the toolbar. And in the event that we lose power today, because you may have heard we have a little bit of severe weather, you may continue, the meeting will continue here in person. So if for whatever reason, wherever you are, you lose power, video goes out, don't worry, unless there are extreme circumstances, we're gonna keep going here in the room. We do have a Spanish language interpreter who is available for the public comment portion of our meeting. I see her in the room, and I would invite you to just stand up and introduce yourself in both English and Spanish. Gracias, Senora Martinez, I believe. Thank you. All right, so this morning's meeting will be relatively short, so board members should not have to take leave too often, but if you do see us leave the front of the room, it doesn't mean that we are exiting the meeting. It just means that we are going to our break area, and we do have the ability to follow the meeting from there. With that, we are ready to hear from our public comment speakers. And as a reminder, the purpose of this public comment period is to hear from individuals who want to alert the board to issues that are not part of a current public discussion via public hearing or an upcoming public hearing, to ensure that we can hear a range of topics and to be fair and consistent and respectful of everyone's time. We do have a one speaker per topic rule. So this rule helps us manage the main purpose of today's meeting, which is to get through the items that are on our agenda. So we appreciate everyone's help in adhering to those guidelines. And we also want you to know that the public comment period is just one of many ways that people can engage with the county board. We have among the traditional old school options of sending in a note via snail mail or email. You can also participate in Open Door Mondays, a regular feature on most Mondays where members of the public, just with a simple advance sign up, can chat with a board member on a topic of their interest. And if you have any questions about any of the myriad ways in which you can engage with the county board, please visit our website and county board, arlingtonva.us, and you can find out all of that information. With that, let's get into public comment. And Mr. Kushner, would you please call our first two speakers?
Of course, our first two speakers are Guy Land, followed by Carol Alvarez.
And actually, Mr. Land, I lied, I think. So I think you do need to press the microphone button to start us off. There we go. Now, from this point on, nobody else touch it. All right, we're good.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Guy Land. I am president of the Fredericton Citizens Association, which represents the roughly 3,400 households in North and South Fredericton. And I come before you this morning to ask your help with what I think is an unintentional problem created by the county's zoning code that impedes the ability or makes more complicated the ability of Fredericton owners to make internal improvements in their condo units in Fredericton. The problem arises from a provision of the zoning code that requires building setbacks. There are some exceptions to the code, but they don't cover Fairlington. And there are some parts of Fairlington that meet the code, but there are many parts that do not. And a part of the code essentially says, as I understand it, that in order to make structural improvements inside your unit, the building must meet the setback requirements. Now, let me remind everyone that the buildings were constructed in the early 1940s, before the zoning code was adopted. And as a practical matter, no one in Fairlington is going to be seeking to move those 80-year-old brick buildings to be able to come into compliance with the zoning code, to do things like build out an attic or open up a kitchen. And so what we come before you this morning is to ask that the board take a look at developing a comprehensive zoning amendment that would address the Fairlington situation. At the moment, the rule requires us to, an owner to go to the, as we are told, the Board of Zoning Appeals to get a waiver of the zoning reg. There were 6 of those before the BZA in September. So the workload is now significant on the BZA in addition to cost and time for our residents themselves. So we ask that you take a look at a zoning amendment, that it be open to the community, respect the historic character of Fairlington, and we look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Land.
All right, our next speaker is Carol Alvarez, followed by Chris DeRosa.
Good morning. My name is Carol Alvarez, and I live in Alcova Heights, South Arlington for over 30 years, which is now one of the most affected neighborhoods in this first year of EHO implementation. My comments are about how non-conforming lots have been approved in the R6 zone. The 2 approved applications, 4015 and 4019 on 7th Street South, have less than the required 60-foot lot width, as it is required to build 6-plex units. A staff interpretation of the zoning ordinance has allowed approval by shifting back the front line so the developer could demonstrate a 60 width on paper, while the lots do not meet the requirement of the EHO. This appears to be a major deviation of variance from the required 60-foot width and has allowed 2 non-conforming applications to be approved. I ask you that you too look into these applications and the repercussions in setting precedents for non-conforming lots to be approved for EHO. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chris DeRosa, followed by Carlos de Castro Pretel.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Okay. I'm Chris DeRosa. For several years, I have volunteered with residents and staff at the RPC Residential Program Center, managed by New Hope Housing on Columbia Pike. I want to highlight 3 needs at the RPC. Last March, I noted before you the lack of a working kitchen at the shelter. I asked the county to help bring the kitchen up to code so that the residents at RPC and the residential treatment program that shares a building can benefit from hot, nutritious, and delicious meals prepared on site. So my question today is, what steps, if any, have been taken to solve this problem? Second, RPC needs medical staff on site to provide services to the residents. Previously, there was a nurse practitioner who worked with both RPC and Pathforge shelters, but that arrangement ended earlier this year. I'm not sure why. Now there's no medically trained staff to manage medications, provide shots for COVID or flu, or prepare medical records. Can the county help with this? And third, I'd like you to help make voting more accessible to the residents of RPC. These voters currently must travel 3 miles to their precinct, number 110, at the Art Atrium in Roslyn. This requires at least 2 bus rides, which can take 35 minutes or more each way. In March 2022, I asked the Elections Office to assign RPC residents to a closer precinct when they drew new boundaries from following redistricting. I was told that they wanted to study this further. When I followed up this past April, I was informed that precinct boundaries was in fact a county board decision, and thus I'm asking you to make a precinct change for 2024. My recommendation would be number 138 at the Carver Community Center, which is only a half mile from the shelter, and that includes the same House and Senate districts 2 and 40. If you can make these 3 changes, it would help very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosa.
All right, our next speaker is Carlos de Castro Pertelt, followed by McCoy Kaufman.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Carlos de Castro Pertelt, and I am here to speak on behalf of Ranchos Voting. I'll refer to it as RCV henceforth. As some of you may remember, on the 18th of July, we had a meeting and we deliberated, whether to implement Ranchos Voting for future general elections. Unfortunately, that vote didn't come to pass. Some very good concerns were mentioned, particular one person, one vote, or the difficulties with demonstrating how it works when you're selecting multiple candidates. Those are very valid concerns, and they have been addressed by scholars and individuals who are far smarter than me online. Due to limitations of time, I apologize, the time hasn't begun.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
No, you're fine, I'll talk all morning long, I'm fine.
Oh, you have 1 minute, 8 seconds.
Oh, very well, I'll be quick then. So those problems have been addressed by people who are smarter or more verbal than me. But perhaps what needs to change is the paradigm that we utilize to create those questions. Zero sum, 1 for 1 creates polarization. The intent here is to attain representational compromise. Otherwise, we continue down this path of polarization where most Americans and Arlingtonians are dreading this upcoming election cycle. I ask of you that you please pass an ordinance empowering the Director of Elections to use Ranchos Voting in all future elections for the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is McCoy Kaufman, followed by Audrey Clement.
Good morning. I'm McCoy Kaufman. I'm here to represent Voice, Virginians Organized for Interfaith Community Engagement. Hopefully you're familiar with our purple shirts at this point. As you know, Voice has campaigned for affordable housing for years, and our leaders have become very familiar with the complexity of the issue. And like you, we're deeply concerned about the housing shortage that's going on nationally and locally. We also understand, like you, that there's no panacea to the housing shortage. First, we want to appreciate all that Arlington's done to address affordable housing through the real estate tax credit program, through AHIF, through the first-time homebuyers program, Arlington-specific grants, and inspection of CAFs. There's been a lot of great work done, but there's still more to be done. So today we want to shine a light on the plight of the residents living at 30% or below the area median income. In light of the agreement that you will soon sign with Jared Lynch for Barcroft Apartments, we've worked with the Arlington Community Foundation Shared Prosperity Team, which has identified a workable plan for 255 units set aside for that lowest income bracket. This is a great opportunity to create more access to affordable housing in Arlington, but we know that that discussion has been delayed. Not many opportunities come up like this, so we ask that you would move quickly on it to get those 255 units for the lowest income bracket that can most benefit from this opportunity. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Audrey Clement, followed by Daniel Henry Halton.
When the county extended a $150 million loan to the buyer of the 1,300-unit Barcroft complex on Columbia Pike in 2021, the public was told it was a do-or-die proposition. Either agree to the deal and make the loan, or the county would lose its largest remaining tranche of market-rate apartments to redevelopment. What it didn't tell the public was that the dilapidated properties, which were assessed at only $138 million, were sold for $425 million, or 3 times their assessed value. Obviously, the buyer could not meet that exorbitant price. So the county's $150 million loan plus another $160 million loan from Amazon were used to fill the gap, in effect rewarding a slumlord for milking a piece of prime real estate on the pike for 50 plus years. Although county staff argued that the loans were needed to prevent evictions, community activist Suzanne Sundberg raised numerous financial red flags about the deal in a letter to the board on December 14, 2021. To my knowledge, her concerns were not addressed. The county manager has acknowledged that the $5.5 million balance in the Columbia Pike Tax Increment Fund will be dedicated to paying off the loan, making the fund off limits to other affordable housing ventures for years to come. That encumbrance alone should have been sufficient to trigger a fiscal impact analysis to determine whether the deal was financially prudent. This the county didn't do, and I see their point. If it's already a done deal, there is no need to second guess it. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Daniel Immaculado, followed by Reginald Nixon.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Immaculado.
Great, thank you. My name is Daniel Immaculado. I live in an apartment complex with over 200 units called the Horizons in Cherrydale, Virginia. It's managed by Dweck Properties. About a week and a half ago, all residents were informed that a major HVAC project was going to happen in our apartment building that is extremely invasive. Starting mid-October through the winter and up until the spring, they are coming into each individual apartment to do work. Contractors will be given keys to our apartment and will have unhindered access from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. each weekday. They will be tearing up walls with asbestos and creating noise for multiple 11-day spans while people are living and working from home. This could be up to 55 business days in total that each tenant will have workers inside their apartments. This work requires shutting off the heat during the months of December, January, and February to portions of our apartments for 13 days at a time. Management claims we can occupy the apartment the entire time the construction is occurring, presumably because they don't want to pay for alternative living arrangements. There are also rodent concerns as mice will have free access into the apartment due to holes that will be left in the wall and only superficially covered during construction. We are being forced to live through this and have zero alternative living arrangements, no rent reduction, no way to break the lease without the usual 2-month rent penalty. Many people don't have the means to pay that penalty. We are completely trapped in what I would consider a borderline uninhabitable situation. This is not a short period of time. This is a working class building with many seniors with respiratory concerns and families with young children. The management company hosted a town hall, but when residents voiced their concerns and had questions about the project, they dodged all questions, gave roundabout answers, and many details and concerns about the project remained unanswered. So I'm asking everyone and anyone for any help or guidance they can offer us, and feel free to reach out to me at 703-867-8814. Thank you.
There are no further speakers. Perhaps there is.
Hello, Mr. Nixon.
Reginald Nixon, pardon me.
Yes. Good morning, board members, colleagues, and potential colleagues. We'll see how that works out. I am Reggie Nixon, and I represent the Columbia Heights Civic Association on this matter, which is our position as a neighborhood on the current site planning for pickleball at our Walter Reed Community Center. We're basically we're describing our needs and limits in order to live with pickleball in our neighborhood, and basing our needs on a study that has been cited and submitted to you some 6 months ago. It's somewhere in your files. It's in there somewhere. But I'm restating the link here in the report that I have previously distributed. Basically, the bottom line is that this extensive study that was commissioned originally by Centennial, Colorado, recognizes that if you're going to have pickleball within residential structures, the proximity of them You need two factors, not just sound abatement structures. You need distance, a minimum distance. Both of them factor into effective sound buffering. The bottom line of the study is that within 100 feet of residential structures to pickleball courts is not recommended. It's just too close, and no sound abatement structure will be sufficiently effective. Therefore, our community as it is now does not meet either requirement. We have inadequate distance, and the sound abatement measure that's been installed is deflective rather than absorbing sound. It has aggravated the impact of sound in the neighborhood. Therefore, we have a list, which you see before you. You can read it in detail, which identifies what we need in order to live with pickleball. We're willing to live with it, but it's not going to be the grand vision that Parks and Recreation recommends.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon.
Thank you.
And my apologies again. This concludes our public speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Kushner. Okay, so first of all, thanks to everyone who participated in public comment this morning. We do appreciate it. We'll address each of the speakers' concerns and see what further guidance we can provide. So first, Mr. Land, thank you. Recognize through your letter that came at the beginning of September the issues that Fairlington residents are having when seeking to make modifications. This is, as many issues are of nonconformity and going back to the historical record pre-zoning ordinance, this requires a fair bit of research to get our heads around, and so our staff has been in the process of doing that work, and will tee up for the board some of the potential considerations for thinking about moving forward. We are mindful that while doing a Fairlington-specific fix may appear to be desirable and relatively simple, one of the things that we have learned is that when it comes to making fixes, you don't want to create issues in other places or not address issues in other places in an effort to be equitable. So we will take a little bit of time to be thoughtful and study this issue. That's not a too long time frame before we figure out how the board can move forward, because I think it's pretty clear that it's not the intent to create hurdles where there weren't hurdles before, or to not allow people to make basic modifications to their home. So it's something that I think we will dig into. Ms. Alvarez, the concerns about 2 approved EHO projects in the Alcova Heights neighborhood. I'm personally not tracking the individual approved applications, but I will say we will follow up with our staff just to make sure that we can explain back to you any reason why there were deviations from what you think are setback rules, or I guess lot width rules that should have applied. So we will connect with them to find an explanation, and then get back with you on how that was determined. As you will recall probably from the EHO discussion, the approval of these is not a matter of the board, so we will not be revisiting the decision. However, we will explain to you the basis under which the decision was made. So we'll look to get in contact with you soon. Mr. Rosa, you brought several issues related to RPC. I'll address the precinct boundaries piece and then turn it over to Mr. DeFerranti, who has been tracking the other issues. You are correct, or what was told to you was correct, that precinct boundaries are ultimately the purview of the county board, but we don't just do that on our own motion. The electoral board from time to time brings us some recommended changes to precinct boundaries to accommodate population shifts or population densities in certain areas. And it has not been, at least the practice while I've been on the board for the last 8 years, that the board has taken up an ad hoc precinct boundary change. So what I will certainly do is to make sure that when the next tranche of precinct boundary recommendations is considered, that we get some feedback on your recommendation as it relates to moving RPC. But that will be probably, if memory serves, sometime next year. Well, I guess I won't be involved with that, but others will. Mr. DeFerranti, do you want to take care of other elements? And I'm sorry, I'll go back to colleagues to deal with any comments on anything that I've gone through thus far.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Rosa, for following up on this. This is there are 2 pieces of what you have raised that I have been working on. I happened to go to the residential program center right around the time that you came in. And so the provision, the working kitchen is an issue where we would need to make some structural changes in the kitchen. And so the cost of that is not as minimal as you or I had hoped. So what we plan to do, and I've been in discussions with the Deputy County Manager, Michelle Cowan, on this, is consider how we can address this in the CIP. I should say in the capital improvement plan next year. And so this will be an issue that I'll follow up. It is not inexpensive to do, and I think I share and the board shares your commitment to serving those without shelter who are at the RPC in the best way possible. So we have to sort of maximize the amount of money it would cost to shift the kitchen versus what we can do to improve meal service. With respect to the meal service itself, I have engaged there. It's not the board's role to make contract decisions for individual providers. It is appropriate, based on your letter, for us to oversee and make sure that money is being properly spent and the service is being well provided. And so I think that's the best summary that I should get to here. I have engaged in this question. I think the meal service may not be what one might wish. It is, I have engaged enough to know that in significant ways it has improved from a couple of years, 2-3 years before. And finally, this, because I just followed up on this week, there's an item that the New Hope Housing has requested that I have engaged on, which is helping residents of the RPC when they move out into permanent supportive housing. And we are seeking to ask the manager to work on furniture holding like a sort of something where we could put donated furniture so that when people move from the RPC into their own apartments with our support as a county, we may be able to hold furniture, which is a cost that is not always met. So that last point is meant to show you that we are taking quite seriously your concerns for the welfare of those living at the RPC. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. McCoy Kaufman, in terms of 30% affordability or deep affordability at the Barcroft Apartments, which is some advocacy work that Voice has joined the Community Foundation in. Certainly, I think members of the board have also been engaged in that work and are working, as you well know, with the other partners in the Barcroft Apartments, Jair Lynch, the principal developer, as well as funding partners, Amazon and the county, to figure out what the master plan is moving forward that will take care of all of the partners' financial interest while also creating a feasible development path for Barcroft. And one of the major goals is to see how we can ensure, strengthen, and deepen affordability as much as we can. So there's not much to report in terms of outcomes at this point, other than it is an active part of the conversation. And I think it's fair to say a shared goal among all parties. What's that? Oh, did I? I'm sorry. Mr. DeCastro Pretelt, I am sorry for overlooking you. That was unintentional. I think I switched you and Mr. Kaufman in my notes. So thank you for coming with your advocacy on RCV. It's good to see you again. I'm going to actually look to our attorney to help me with this one. So I believe that your basic ask that the board delegate to the registrar the ability to determine the manner of election, essentially, by using RCV in future elections is not something that the board can do. I thought that this was a power that was by code for the board alone.
That's correct.
Okay, so in terms of that, the board would have to actually accomplish that action. Now, that said, I don't know what the board moving forward will do, but I think it's fair to say from the experience, the positive experience that we had generally with RCV the first time around, and some of the comments that board members made in discussing it, that we can safely say that RCV is not done in Arlington. Under what circumstances and when next is still yet to be determined, but I'm sure will be discussed very soon. Ms. Clement, your concerns about Barcroft, I will just note that there's an extensive website or web section of the Arlington County government website devoted to Barcroft with lots of documents, answers to frequently asked questions that we've heard or people could even hope to pose and ask. So any issues of transparency that you have, encourage you to read that. I think the things that you mentioned are actually addressed on the website. And one of your principal concerns that the selling price for Barcroft went above actual appraised price or assessed price. That's actually a common occurrence in real estate. I think most people know that the assessed value is not the value at which things sell. So I encourage you to look at all of those things, and I'm sure we'll hear lots of those talking points during the campaign season between now and November. And Mr. Immaculado, the Horizon Apartments, we're going to have to, or I'm going to at least have to think on this a little bit in order to direct you to maybe the most appropriate resources to help you, especially given the time frame that the planned renovations are to occur. I do not want to, from this dais, recommend sources that might take a little longer to see if they can be of help. So thank you for providing your phone number, excuse me, and we'll think on some ways in which you can avail yourself of maybe perhaps even some pro bono legal counsel or some other help in mediating and having discussions with your landlord. I will say that our powers, if you will, are very limited to change the course of what a private property owner wants to do. They are free to do pretty much what they'd like, subject to the terms of the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, the prevailing law which governs tenants' rights and landlords' responsibilities. So first, I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with VRLTA. It's part of the Virginia Code, and then let us get back to you in ways in which we can provide some recommendations for what else you might be able to do. All right, with that, colleagues, I know you have comments on some of these issues, so Mr. Karantonis, we'll start with you, and then Ms. Garvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lamb, thank you for coming today and testifying here. I'm particularly grateful for the quite a detailed letter that the association has sent us on the 29th. I want to add only one aspect to that. You are absolutely correct that the issue began to percolate, with successive applications for just normal things like remodeling a kitchen, right? At the BZA. I mean, it's very counterintuitive to have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a kitchen remodel. And I should note also that I looked at the records of the BZA, and I saw that several of these applications as of recently are approved by a 3-2 very, very thin majority, which I can imagine that just compounds the uncertainty that members of your association have for just regular things that every Arlingtonian looks at. So, Mr. Chair, I do think, Mr. Manager, I do think that there is certain pressure to fix that as soon as possible, because this is really a very unintended consequence of a legislative gap that we obviously have there. And I would encourage also, Mr. Chair, if you allow, these are things that the Board of Zoning Appeals normally includes in their annual report. Maybe it's a good idea to invite the board to report, because there may be more of these little problems that are not little for the constituent, right? Mrs. Alvarez, I had the opportunity to visit these lots for 4015 and 4019 7th Street in Alcova Heights. There are several issues associated with them. I think that we need to do a deeper dive. This is not a very typical situation, subdivided, a very big subdivided lot. It's non-conforming, as in extremely big in its original form for an R6 district. It's almost 20,000 square feet, and it was subdivided, and we have a pipe stem situation, et cetera. So I think it's worth to look back. I agree with the chair that we don't want to intervene in the administrative process, but on the other side, we are learning a lot from this kind of exceptional situations. And I underscore the word exceptional, because this is a really tough situation there that we need to look very close and see what we learn from that. Ms. De Rosa, in addition to what Mr. DeFerranti has mentioned, I have some background on the kitchen of RPC that goes back to literally the year 2011. When we tried to bring this kitchen into compliance so that we could use it for not only to provide healthy meals for the peoples that RPC serves, but also to provide some opportunity of being a ghost kitchen, as the ones that we recently made possible to be used by small businesses to have an additional kitchen. To be able to produce. This has been really very long on the books of back and forth, and I'm looking at Mr. DeFerranti's leadership to find a final fix to that for all the good reasons, and this additional one, because on Columbia Pike, as we learned from La Cocina, having an additional resource of a ghost kitchen like the one that's in RPC is gold worth, and it would also provide an additional revenue for RPC that's badly needed for other reasons as well. To Ms. Clement, and in addition to what Mr. Dorsey said, not only is everything on the website, and there's extensive narrative on this, there is also one has to remember that's a fundamental difference on how a commercial business, which was the Barcroft rental apartments, is assessed and pays than what a private home is assessed and pays. This needs to be reiterated, and I really encourage Dr. Clement to look back to these fundamental instruments of governance and see how this is treated in governance. Finally, to Horizon, I'm Mr. Immaculado, I'm very concerned about one thing that you said, among anything else, that there is asbestos removal, and I didn't hear you talking about abatement. This is really a problem, and I hope that we can find for you appropriate resources to look at. Finally, to Mr. Nixon, this is a question to the county manager. There was a recent, addition to the pickleball courts at Walter Reed. There's a sound mitigation. How do we follow up with assessing how this works, and how do we report on this? Final point. This is a message that I got here on my cell phone. It appears that we lost a kid on overdose.
Yeah.
It's a 9th grader, whatever the circumstances are, and I don't know the particular circumstances. It's a tragic thing, and I'm really devastated and heartbroken about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis, and it's something that the Wakefield community was advised of last night, and resources are going to be made available to the students next week. Details are not known at this time. Mr. Nixon, my apologies for overlooking you in my summary of remarks. It's just that we've become so familiar through our visits with Open Door Mondays. I feel like you're an old friend. And so, in addition to Mr. Karantonis's question, I just would like to alert everyone to the state of where we are. With pickleball, sound acoustic fencing has been, or acoustic barriers have been placed at Walter Reed and some others, and we are evaluating how those are working as we're learning, or as we knew, as is the case with airport noise or pickleball noise. This is something that is quite difficult because it is experienced by people subjectively, and so while there have been some really interesting and important studies about trying to determine the intensity of the pickleball pop and at what distance you should locate facilities in order to make sure people are not bothered by it. We know that subjectively different people are bothered by different things based on different circumstances. So finding a clear, objective way of, quote, solving this problem is going to be rather elusive. And your last point that you made in your remarks, Mr. Nixon, is our guiding principle. We're trying to work any and all ways to figure out how to make pickleball work, because we know that people appreciate playing it and enjoying it. and we're just trying to find a way to make it harmoniously blend in with our facilities in Arlington. It's going to be a work in progress, so I appreciate your patience and goodwill. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll try to go through pretty quickly, but I do appreciate everybody coming in. These comments are to bring things to the board's attention that is not on the agenda that we might not know about, and a number of people have really done that here, which is very helpful to us and to our staff to try to serve everyone better. Mr. Land, we've talked. Thank you so much for coming in, and I'll be pushing a little bit. I mean, I know we have a CPHD work plan that this would classically go into, but this is something, these renovations have been done just fine for decades, and then all of a sudden there's not. So what has really changed? Not really anything. I'm hoping we can do a pretty quick fix on it, but we will see. Ms. Alvarez, thank you very much. I may be the only board member, but I have said that when I adopted the EHO, that to me it was a pilot, and we're going to be following it pretty closely and finding out how it actually is playing out, and certainly we will be following it closely to make sure that what we adopted is what we want and having the effects we want, but that will take some time to play out, and thank you for bringing these two sites to our attention. Ms. DeRosa, I was just going to add, nothing else to add from what everyone said, except during elections, I know the Democratic Party and maybe the Republican Party offer rides to the polls. So if there's some residents that need rides to the polls, and you could probably put up a number, just check on the Democratic Party website, and possibly the Republicans do it as well. But I think if people are having trouble getting there, I suspect there's some folks that would be very happy to give people rides to the polls. And Mr. DeCastro Patel, thank you very much. Yes, this is a very complex issue, and there are lots of people who are way smarter than we are to try to figure out how ranked choice voting works, and I think in many instances it does work well, as you noted, and the concerns I've expressed is when you have two people up and how that actually plays out. I'm not sure that is really what we want, but I'm sure we'll continue to look at it. Thank you. Comments on Barcroft, the caution from our, or recommendation from our chair to look at the website is a good one, I think. I really think a lot of work is being done on Barcroft, and continues to be a really important facility for us here. Mr. Maculata, a couple of things. There's a landlord-tenant commission, colleagues. I don't know, he might be able to go to the landlord-tenant commission, might work. And then we also have an ombudsman. That position's been vacant, and an acting person has been doing a fine job, but a little bit overwhelmed with all of the work, and now we have hired someone. So that's somebody else that I think Mr. Maculata could go and talk to would be our ombudsman, and I'll just turn to our manager and check that my information's correct on that we have hired someone.
Yes, he's sitting in the second row there, and Kevin, you can wave hello to everybody. That's you, Kevin. There, okay.
Hi.
Kevin Conley.
Welcome. We're so glad to see you. We have things for you to do already. Great. So Mr. Maculata is not here, but anyway, he can connect with you as well, and you've got his number. Thank you. Mr. Nixon, pickleball. Yes, this too. It's a work in progress. We're working on it, and I'll look forward to seeing you maybe at an open forum Monday as well. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Talento.
Good morning, everyone. I just first want to thank everyone for coming out and providing their comments, especially as a new county board member. It's very helpful for me to be aware of things that may not be coming before me immediately in the work with staff. Mr. Land, I also had to go before a BZA board when I remarried and merged families. It did feel, let me tell you, it was a process, and I was surprised by how at times it felt invasive with showing our plans on how we're trying to bring our families together. So I understand the stress that your community may be facing, but I also understand the need for our county to ensure that we're supporting our neighborhoods and applying county ordinances. So I am looking forward, if it is during my time here, to look at ways to address this for your community. I'm familiar with the Arlington community and completely recognize what you are sharing with us and the challenges that your neighbors and community may be facing in trying to meet this ordinance and to improve their homes. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Ms. Alvarez, regarding the EHO, I am not as familiar with these policies in the level of detail that some of my colleagues may be, but I will try to also inform myself and get better informed on what the actual implementation of them are. And work with my colleagues to understand what is happening in this particular situation so that we can, again, as Chair Dorsey said, get back to you and determine what the situation is in these particular lots. And thank you for coming today. Mr. Rosa, I look forward to engaging my colleagues. Mr. DeFerranti and Mr. Carantonis regarding challenges at the RPC. I don't know if I'll be here for the time where we're dealing with the CIP, but if there is any direction before my time ends in December, I will do my best to make sure we are looking at the needs at the RPC. And thank you for bringing that to our attention. Mr. Patel, ranked choice voting, I really appreciate you coming and speaking about that. I'm familiar with ranked choice voting. I believe education is really key, and it's just something that takes a long time to understand, in particular to many of our communities who may not be familiar with the voting process here in the U.S. and maybe first-time voters, first-time Americans. So I think it's something we need to continue to work on, continue to look, and really ensure that our election process not only is easily accessible, but easily understandable, and really appreciate your advocacy because I think it's a conversation that needs to continue. As far as the Barcroft plans go, with Gerald Lynch, I also support committed affordable housing, especially at the lower income levels, and really appreciate the advocacy that Voice is doing. And I will be looking for that information to come and make sure that we can support the best move forward to do that with. Ms. Clement, thank you Dr. Clement, thank you for bringing your advocacy to the county board. I am not as familiar with this project at the time of purchase, but I will look into it, and if I see any concerns, I will share them with my colleagues. It sounds like, based on the experience of my colleagues, that this has been done with a lot of due diligence, and it was an informed and thoughtful decision and efforts to really make sure that we are not losing some affordable housing that is necessary, especially on the Pike where we've already lost so much. And Mr. Immaculado, I also need to study the VRLTA and familiarize myself with what our tenant rights are, and hope that in some way we can at least provide you resources to address these needs, but I may be following up with you to learn a little bit more about the issue. Mr. Nixon, I am not a pickleball player. I've been told I should become one. I don't know about that, but I will tell you that I am also, I used to live in multifamily housing, recognize that noises can be disturbing to someone's quality of life, and we'll look to work with finding a compromise to support our pickleball players, but also support the community that is welcoming them into their homes. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments, Chair Dorsey.
Thank you. And Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 3 points. First, Ms. Alvarez, I had not known, but I did check the EHO permit website this morning, and you may know, I believe it was updated yesterday, and you mentioned that you thought both permits were approved, and this is not meant in any way to discount Mr. Carantonis and Chair Dorsey's comments. I just think I want to press a little bit on the realistic path forward is not for us to reconsider, but I wonder if there's any inappropriate manner we would sort of have to engage, find out what staff's decision, explain it as the chair said, and then the rest is because it's by right, the rest is persuasion and hope that this would work out in the best possible way for your neighbors, but not a legal process. So it's not because I wanted to be honest about those circumstances, and I certainly think the chair and Mr. Carantonis and our staff can follow up. And that's just what I had seen when I looked at the EHO permit as you were speaking or just after you spoke. A second point, in addition to I want to thank the manager for adding Mr. Connolly to help lead the team. Thrilled about that. I also want to recognize Ms. Thomas for this is a super hard job to be the primary interface as we address constituent services, and so just a big thanks for your work. In addition, and looking forward to both of you doing a job that is sometimes harder than I would ever want to do on a moment-to-moment basis. So that's a second thought. And a third is a question regarding Mr. Kaufman's comments for the manager that maybe you could follow up. I think we had a target of September, October, maybe November as the time frame for when we might hear an update. The housing staff is working on this, and you don't have to know it off the top, but I just wondered if I could follow up or if you have any sense, are we still in that kind of time frame, and I think it's smart not to overpromise.
No, it's my expectation and fervent hope that I'll be to the board, excuse me, within the next 90 days with a full proposal. We have been working very diligently. We have had a few things happen since the original deal, including a complete turnaround in the way the housing market works. But we're working diligently with our partners, and we'll be back to you within the next 90 days.
Thank you so much, appreciated. There's both the overall agreement that Mr. Kaufman referenced, and then there's the sort of study and work that I think Ms. Flanagan Watson has been working on the 30% and below, and that part I'm of particularly keen interest in addition to the agreement as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. And again, thank you for coming and participating in public comment, and we will follow up as we stated with those who we are following up with. That concludes our public comment period. We are now ready to move on with our consideration of the consent agenda. Mr. Kushner, have any items been pulled from our consent agenda?
Yes. Give me a moment. Item number 25, concerning an ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify Chapter 10, Trash, Recycling, and Care of Premises, Article 2, also known as the Condition of Private Property Ordinance of the Arlington County Code, to amend and clarify definitions and responsibilities, has been pulled.
All right, thank you. That has been pulled by a member of the public. At this time, a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exclusion of that item will be in order. So moved by Mr. DeFerranti. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Carantonis. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Please say aye. 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 Any opposed? The ayes have it 5-0, and the consent agenda is approved. So we will hold a public hearing on that item number 25, which was pulled from the consent agenda at the start of our evening portion of our recess meeting on Tuesday, the 26th of September. That hearing will begin no earlier than 6:30 p.m. If you want to speak on that item, you can sign up on the county board's website beginning today. If you do not have access to a computer, you can also feel free to call us during business hours at 703-228-3130 to register to speak at that meeting. But even with that item that was pulled, the board just approved dozens of consent agenda items, including minor site plan amendments, use permit requests, ordinance amendments, requests to advertise, and more. These items are placed on our consent agenda not because they're unimportant, but because there are dozens of them, and we cannot hold efficient public hearings on all of them. And so they are thought to be non-controversial, therefore they are placed on our consent agenda, but they are certainly important, so I'll highlight a few. Item 24, this is the enactment of something that was advertised where the board has amended Chapter 14.2 of the County Code that requires motor vehicle operators to stop completely for pedestrians in crosswalks, whereas the previous law only required a yield. This code change puts us in conformance with state law and also is consistent with the best practices as we implement our Vision Zero efforts. Item number 33, the Crystal City Metro Rail Station, excuse me, East Entrance Final Design Agreement. This just brings together and commits the resources to move forward with the project coordination for the new metro station entrance at Crystal City. This project is responsive to ridership demand, as Crystal City is one of the most heavily used metro stations, as well as an important link for those who are connecting through VRE, ART, Metrobus, et cetera. We also have accepted millions of dollars in state and federal funding to support county programs and services. For item number 34, that's a little over $300,000 in VDOT funding to support the design and construction of the Bluemont Junction Trail Phase 2 project, which includes updating 3 remaining trail connectors to comply with the ADA, completing the trail's pedestrian and cyclist network, and milling and repaving a segment of the 4-mile run trail. Then item number 35 is $2.25 million in funding for stormwater management and water to be used for water and sewer utility infrastructure within the county. We also accepted with item 38, $149,000 in Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funds from the Virginia Community College System to support Arlington Tech talent programs efforts to train residents with non-traditional backgrounds in computer-related occupations like information technology and cybersecurity. And we accepted nearly $300,000 from the Virginia Department of Health to support county programming designed to reduce COVID-19 health disparities and advance health equity through workforce trainings, translation of communications materials, community engagement, and costs associated with community engagement and strategic planning efforts. We also gave some money away with some grants. Item 39, the board approved the allocation of $215,810 in direct financial support to 16 arts organizations, along with 2 individual artists through the Arlington Arts Grant Program. These awards come at the recommendation of the Arlington Commission for the Arts, which is responsible for the annual distribution of arts resources among Arlington artists and cultural organizations. For item 46, the board also approved an MOU between the Virginia Department of Health and the county to allow the Juvenile Domestic Relations District Court Services Unit, say that 3 times fast, to initiate a Narcan Leave Behind program free of charge to their clients, parents, families, and with the goal of preventing fatalities and increasing community awareness to Narcan. And then finally, there is an amendment to Chapter 48, item 50, which is an amendment to Chapter 48, which concerns flood plan management. The board authorized the advertisement of a public hearing in October to consider an amendment to that chapter of the county code. We are required to update this ordinance to continue participation in the National Flood Insurance Program, which makes flood insurance available to property owners within our county. The amended ordinance would closely conform to the state model ordinance, which was developed by the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation to facilitate approval by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Phew! A lot of stuff. All right. So I think at this point, we're now ready to move on to our regular agenda. Mr. Kushner, would you please call our first item?
Yes, of course. Item number 53 relates to the Bingham Center. Site plan number 467 at 3200 Wilson Boulevard. Part A is the site plan number 467 to construct approximately 5.10 floor area ration total density, including 290 dwelling units of residential floor area, 229 rooms of hotel floor area, and 6,169 square foot of retail floor area. The proposed development to be located at 3200 Wilson Boulevard. And Part B are the ordinances of vacation to vacate a 1,429 square foot portion of a 12-foot wide public alley located between Wilson Boulevard and 10th Street North, a 3,171 square foot portion of a 12-foot wide public alley located between Wilson Boulevard and 10th Street North, and a 1,586 square foot portion of a public street and utilities easement on the south side of Wilson Boulevard and the west side of North Irving Street.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, would you like to start us off here?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm going to turn it over to Courtney Badger from CPHD, who's here, also joined by Rob Gibson and Mike Haluski from the Department of Environmental Services. Over to you, Ms. Badger.
Good morning, board members. I'm Courtney Badger with the Planning Division. I'll be giving a presentation on behalf of staff for the Bingham Center project. The Bingham Center proposal consists of 2 items, a site plan to facilitate the redevelopment of the site, and then an ordinance to vacate a portion of public alley. The site is located at 3200 Wilson Boulevard, which is within the Clarendon Revitalization District. The site is currently developed with the old Silver Diner building, the Lot Beer Garden, a couple retail buildings and surface parking lots. The site plan includes the majority of the block shown here on the screen, but does not include the southeast corner, which is the site of the Joyce Motors site plan that was approved in February earlier this year. The applicant is proposing to construct 2 new buildings, a hotel on the northern portion of the block and a mixed-use residential building on the southern portion. The hotel is proposed to be 10 stories in height with 229 rooms, a penthouse amenity space, and a ground floor cafe. The residential building is proposed to be 11 stories with 290 units and ground floor retail. Both buildings will be parked with the new parking garage underground. The applicant will be coordinating with the Joyce Motors project to provide a new 10th Road North, which will run east-west between the residential and the hotel buildings. They will also be coordinating to construct a new north-south alley between the proposed residential building and the Joyce Motors building. The applicant is requesting zoning modifications for additional density, reduced parking and loading, some design requirements, and density exclusions. There's also a proposed vacation on the site. The applicant is requesting to vacate a public alley, a portion of which was vacated with the Joyce Motors project. The site is subject to the 2022 updates to the Clarendon Sector Plan. The majority of the sector plan guidance is codified through the Arlington County zoning ordinance, and I'm going to pull out a few of those key guidelines that staff analyzed during the course of the review. Starting first with the sector plan identified 2 building stepbacks along Wilson Boulevard, which are shown in purple and circled in red on the map here. The purpose of these stepbacks is to help create a pedestrian architecture and to be contextually appropriate with existing buildings. The applicant's proposal meets with this intent of the sector plan to create pedestrian scale environment along Wilson Boulevard and to be contextually appropriate with the buildings across Wilson. Second, the sector plan has a maximum height of 110 feet at this location with tapering on the southern building, which the applicant is meeting. The sector plan also calls for 60% commercial use on the northern parcel, which is being met by the hotel use, and a residential or mixed-use building on the southern parcel, which is also being met. The sector plan envisions an Irving Plaza, which abuts the building on the east side. This is to be approximately 6,200 square feet. And the main purpose the sector plan identifies for this is to maintain a pedestrian connection from Lyon Park and Ashton Heights Civic Associations to the south up through the site and into the Clarendon Central Park and up to the metro station. And this will be provided with the delivery of this project. And then finally, the sector plan identifies service functions and loading to incur on the new 10th Road North and new alley, internalizing all service and loading functions internal to the block. And this is where we saw the largest project evolution throughout the process. You can see on the left, the applicant was originally proposing to locate the loading for the hotel on North Irving Street and push the back of house uses onto North Irving, resulting in limited transparency and introducing pedestrian conflict point along the adjacent future Irving Plaza. The applicant has since revised their ground floor plan for the hotel to locate the loading to be off of 10th Road North and has agreed to have transparent windows into the kitchen along North Irving Street, providing transparency and what could be a unique experience to pedestrians and plaza goers having this type of activation along the plaza. Here are the resulting facades for the North Irving Street. The original submittal is on the top. In the current submittal on the bottom, you can see the area demarcated in yellow is the area that will have transparent windows, the ground floor of which will be into the kitchen. And the area demarcated by red is the area that's conditioned and required to have a decorative treatment. Finally, the project is earning density through providing community benefits, including participation in the Green Building Incentive Program at the 0.35 FAR level. They will also be providing 15 on-site committed affordable units, 5 one-bedrooms and 10 two-bedrooms available at the 60% area median income level for 30 years. The applicant will be funding the public design process for the future Irving Street Plaza and then constructing what comes out of that. They will also be giving a monetary contribution towards public space improvements in Clarendon. Finally, they'll be providing a 10-foot streetscape on the west side of Wilson Boulevard, which will include a widened sidewalk, a landscape strip, and new streetlights. The project proposal furthers all 3 overarching goals of the sector plan by improving the quality of the public realm, creating accessible and connected places, and maintaining a rich mix of uses. This project went through a year-long community engagement process, starting with the Site Plan Review Committee, then going to Transportation, Planning, and Housing Commissions. All 3 commissions voted unanimously to recommend approval of the project. Transportation and Planning Commissions both passed similar motions requesting a mid-block crossing on Wilson Boulevard. This is something that staff doesn't support at this time, but is committed to make sure that it's not precluded by this development if it's needed in the future. With that, staff recommends that you approve the Bingham Center site plan and find the ordinance of vacation substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan of Arlington County. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to answer questions when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Badger. We're now ready to hear from the applicant. I see Mr. Schultz here. Who else is representing the applicant?
This is David Tarter. I'm on the screen. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Tarter.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I had avoided COVID for 2.5 years, but this past week it finally hit me with a loud thunk.
Well,
So,
Mayor, we wish you
I,
a speedy recovery. All right.
thank you so much. So I'd like to share my screen right now. First off, let me just say we do have members of the team in person and also other folks online. So the full contingent of our development team is with us today to hopefully answer any questions or concerns you might have. If I may, let me go ahead and share the screen and then go ahead and go through a brief presentation for you. So let's see if this comes up. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Courtney did a very nice presentation. I want to thank her, Rob Gibson, Mike Haluski, and the whole team. They've been very patient with us. As you heard, this is a long time coming. There were some challenges, particularly with the site layout and design. But let me take you very briefly through our project. As you saw before, the site is really a giant triangle. And we carved off a nice rectangle for Joyce Motors through a complex consolidation and land swap. We were left with 2 triangles. And those are always a challenge. You don't have 4 sides. You don't have a back to your project, particularly with the hotel, which is an operating business. It presents some real challenges. And so we've worked through the challenges with staff over this past period of time. Anyway, let's go up to the next slide. This is what it is now. You're familiar with the site. It's a lot of asphalt, it's a lot of curb cuts, and it's a lot of substandard streetscape. You can see here, I mean, it feels dangerous just walking on the sidewalk around here. And so we're going to make significant improvements to this site that'll really bring it into the modern era. On this slide here, you can see up to 38% of our site, this green area here, is being conveyed for public purposes. That could be widening Wilson Boulevard, shifting Wilson Boulevard, adding a new 10th Road North, widened streetscape throughout the whole site. So over a third of our site is now being conveyed for public uses, which is going to make a dramatically better site for everyone. But it did present those challenges I mentioned to you. Here's another view of our site, green roofs, landscape terraces, ground floor restaurants, that activation on the ground floor that everybody wants. You're going to have it here. This is going to be, to my knowledge, the only hotel in Clarendon, and it's going to be a high-end hotel that I think everybody's going to be really proud of. You heard the site summary. I'm not going to go through that again. We think parking is commensurate with other projects in the area. This is a bird's eye view. Above on the left is the hotel. On the right is the multifamily residential. Northside Social is the red building at the bottom there. This is our hotel, and we think it's going to be a really exciting hotel. Another view of that hotel, and another view again of the hotel. This is some of the inspiration. It really wants to be, and my client wants us to be, a very high-end hotel, quirky, funky. He likes to say Clarendon funky, and I think that's what you're going to get with this project. But really capturing the feel and the flavor of Clarendon, both on the outside and on the inside. This is the multifamily residential building. We're looking up Wilson Boulevard to the left, 10th Street to the right. Again, you can see that taper called for in the sector plan, 75 feet, 95 feet, and 110 feet. We've got green roofs, terraces. We've got meet the 15% tree canopy that the county seeks. It's being met in this project. Again, you can see those canopies, the green roofs, and the like here in this view. This is up above 10th Street. And creating a really nice walkable streetscape, a dramatic improvement as to what's there now. Potential for outdoor seating, wide sidewalks, safe sidewalks, streetscape, street lights, furniture, street trees, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be a dramatic improvement from what you see in the current condition. Project's also very LEED sustainable. We are seeking LEED Gold at the 0.35 level. And so we've got lots of good stuff going on with the environment, and we can go into that if you so desire. I think we're especially proud of our community benefits package. 15 ADUs, 10 two-bedroom units, those big units, 5 one-bedroom units, and 2 of the units are type A accessible. So we're very proud of that aspect of the project. The park is really exciting. It's modest in size, something like 6,200 square feet, but we think it's going to be a really nice addition to the neighborhood, and it's going to be built in connection with the hotel. So it's not going to be one of these projects that lingers. It was important to my client, and I think the county as well, to just kind of get on with things. And so the developer will pay for the process, the county will manage it, and the developer will build the park that is ultimately designed in the county-led process. So we're excited about that as well. This is the other side of Wilson Boulevard. As you can see, it's not much better than our side. Very narrow sidewalks. And so we're going to be improving that as well. And so Wilson is kind of shifting over to our side. As I mentioned earlier, we're taking kind of the brunt of the Wilson Boulevard, and this side can get bigger. And so we're going to go ahead and pay to enlarge this side of the sidewalk and streetscape on Wilson Boulevard. So you're going to have a dramatically better experience on the other side of Wilson Boulevard with a wider sidewalk, landscaping, street lights, et cetera. So we think that's going to be a huge addition to an area that really, I think, desperately needs some pedestrian improvements. This is just a summary of what I've already told you. I don't think I need to go into this, but we're very excited about the project. It's been a long time coming, but we really appreciate all the hard work that's gotten us to where we are right now. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charter, and we see that the team is all assembled and will be available for questions. We're now ready to move to our advisory groups for any comments. We have from the Planning Commission, Mr. Helmy, you'll start, and then you'll be followed by Mr. Macbeth, who I think may be joining us virtually, and then finally Ms. McIntyre, who is here in the room.
Good morning, Chair Dorsey and County Board members. As mentioned, I'm Jim Lantelmy, and I'm here representing the Planning Commission. We heard the application for Site Plan 467, the Bingham Center, at our last meeting, and we voted unanimously 12-0 to recommend approval of this project. We approved an additional motion, 12-0, that I'll get into a bit later. Prior to our vote, we had one public speaker who stated that the landscape plan and proposals for the Irving Street Plaza were inadequate. Issues touched upon during our discussion included affordable housing and the mix of units, open space, tree canopy and landscape, the pedestrian experience, parking, and the Irving Street Plaza. The Planning Commission's deliberations were mostly centered on affordable housing and the desirability of a mid-block pedestrian crossing at Wilson Boulevard and the newly created 10th Road North. This project incorporates apartments reserved at the 60% AMI level, including 2-bedroom family units. The commissioners commended this, but also noted the great need for units reserved at the 30% AMI level and asked staff if negotiations on future projects could include that level. The commission also opined that family-size units really should be considered 3+ bedrooms rather than 2. For transportation, the commissioners noted with approval that the 2 buildings in this project will share a below-ground garage and that knockout panels will be designed into the project to allow sharing with the approved Joyce Motors project right next to it. Thus, the entire block will have a shared garage. Other transportation-related issues concern the desirability of a mid-block crossing on Wilson Boulevard. Staff has not included such a crossing in the site plan. The commissioners noted that Northside Social is directly across Wilson from the new intersection, and this project will generate a good number of apartment residents and hotel guests who will no doubt cross the street directly to get to it rather than walking to the ends of this fairly long block to the formal crossings. We note that across the street, the development is pretty much all locked in. As you know, Northside Social is a very, very popular attraction, just drawing people from the neighborhood. Next door is an auto-oriented unit building that is preserved, will presumably change function in the future. Beyond that is a Dominion substation, which is not going to be changing. But the Northside Social is right across that potential new intersection. The applicant supports the concept of a crossing here. DES staff said that an existing pedestrian desire line has not been established. They will be open to evaluation post-construction. The commission, along with the Transportation Commission, believes the need is sufficiently apparent now that planning for such crossing should be done as part of this. As such, the commission voted unanimously in favor of an amendment to the motion recommending approval of the project that would include a pedestrian crossing at Wilson Boulevard and the new 10th Road North. In voting to recommend approval, the Planning Commission was overall very enthusiastic about this project and noted the applicant was responsive to staff, commission, and neighborhood recommendations during the SPRC process. The proposed vacation was also unanimously found to be consistent with the Master Transportation Plan, and the vote was 12-0. I thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lantelmi. And do we have Mr. Macbeth?
Yes, I am here.
Great.
Thank you very much. The Housing Commission considered the applicant's proposal at its September 14th meeting, and the commission ended up voting unanimously to approve the project. The Housing Commission appreciates the additional contribution of 15 on-site committed affordable units to earn additional bonus density, especially in Clarendon, where we have a real dearth of committed affordable units and just affordable units in general. We also discussed with the applicant potentially looking at increasing the amount of type A accessible units at both the residential building as well as the hotel. That's been a topic that has come up many times for different site plans within the Housing Commission, is looking to go beyond the required 2% and increasing the amount of housing available for residents with disabilities and accessibility concerns. We had also discussed and asked questions of the staff about how they valued the on-site CAFs in exchange for additional density and how that had worked out in the negotiation process. But overall, we were very supportive of the project, appreciated the presentations and the work of both staff and the applicant, and look forward to it moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Macbeth. And now Ms. McIntyre from C2E2.
Morning. I'm Joan McIntyre, speaking on behalf.
It's on.
Okay. Speaking on behalf of the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission. While the applicant is participating in the Green Building Incentive Policy at the 0.3.5 FAR level, which is above the minimum required for the program, it does fall short in meeting the county's community energy goals. Some of the extra points that they'll be earning to get the 3.5 relate to leakage testing for air and envelope, as well as the 5% reduction of life cycle greenhouse gas emissions and offsite renewable energy for about 30% of its energy needs for, I believe, a 10-year period. But again, with our own overall scoring, we give it about a 63%, which is pretty much on par with what we're seeing with many other buildings that we've looked at. As with most projects, we again focus very heavily on electrification. Electrification is crucial for reducing fossil fuel consumption, because when the electric grid can change and is changing, and in fact the commitment to offsite renewable energy will lower the profile for this building overall in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So again, this project is planning gas for HVAC, hot water, and we presume cooking for the commercial facilities, although it's not actually specified. For the HVAC system, that's primarily in the ventilation system. Again, this is what we often see. In this case, they're actually opting for probably the most greenhouse gas emission system, which is a furnace, a gas furnace. Its energy performance model actually identifies a couple of alternatives that we've seen other projects use, which would be a heat pump system that uses auxiliary either gas or electric heat. Obviously, we would, again, recommend highly that they look at the electric portion of that. Heat pump hot water is extremely energy efficient, and we would strongly encourage the applicant to look at that. Again, it's mentioned as an option in their performance. And then on cooking, even in our kind of gold star projects such as Met Park and Penn Place, that tends to be the option of providing gas for commercial kitchen facilities. And we think that's probably time to start switching our focus on that and should actually look for all-electric kitchen facilities to, again, move towards an all-electric building. On the energy efficiency, again, key thing, cutting down the amount of energy that you're using is the first step in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emission. The project commits to the minimum of 20% reduction over the ASHRAE baseline. However, based on their energy performance models, it would look like they could very easily meet 25% or more above the ASHRAE. So we would strongly encourage them to continue to focus on options of reducing their or improving their energy efficiency across the board. And then again, EV charging, they're going with a minimum. We would encourage them to consider increasing the amount of particularly EV-ready spaces so that they can accommodate a shift, which could be probably more rapid than some people had earlier been anticipating. And maybe so that they can go there. But again, summing up, we're looking this year again at breaking a record on heat. And that's almost certain given the extreme temperatures we've had this winter. We just don't have time to wait. There isn't really a transition period over. So every building that we build really needs to be looking at striving to get the maximum amount of reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and in particularly reducing the on-site fossil fuel consumption, which makes it very difficult to change over time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McIntyre. And we're now ready for our public speakers. Mr. Kushner, do we have any?
We do. Give me just a moment. All right, our first speaker is Chad Berwick, followed by Bernard Byrne.
Hey, good morning. My name is Chad Berwick, and I'm a resident of Clarendon. This is actually my first time speaking in front of the county board, so thank you for letting me speak today. I'm speaking today in order to express my support for the approval of the Bingham Center. I believe that this building is a great fit for Clarendon, and that it provides additional density to an area that is seeing a lot of increased demand, as well as providing funds for the Irving Plaza and constructing it, which will be a great space for the Clarendon community once it's done. I look forward to new visitors staying in the hotel, making use of the completed Irving Plaza, and most importantly, welcoming new neighbors. Additionally, I just wanted to shout out Christine Wood from the Clarendon Courthouse Civic Association for all of her work she does for the neighborhood, including her involvement in the SBRC process for the site plan. Thank you.
Thank you, and we hope it's not the last time we see you, and that you're always positive.
No, that's not a requirement.
Right, of course, just a hope.
All right, our next speaker is Bernard Byrne, followed by Jason Schwartz.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, though it's a bit muffled, Mr. Byrne.
The conceptual landscape plan for this project does not describe the species and locations of any shrubs, ground covers, and perennials that the applicant will install. I have repeatedly asked the applicant to provide this information during the site plan review process and the Planning Commission's public hearing. However, the applicant has not responded to my requests. Please therefore require the applicant to provide this information for public review before you approve this project. You haven't done this before, but you should start doing it now. To comply with the County Board's 2016 Monarch Pledge, the plantings should contain native plants that support pollinators, especially common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. This is the only plant on which monarch butterflies prefer to lay eggs and which survives in Arlington's natural areas. No other milkweed species native to Northern Virginia provides these benefits. For U.S. Forest Service publication states that common milkweed is, quote, nature's mega-food for insects. Over 450 insects are known to feed on some portion of the plant. In the Northeast and Midwest, it is among the most important food plants for monarch caterpillars. A publication by the Xerxes Society for Vertebrate Conservation states that studies have demonstrated the protection of common milkweed is essential to sustain eastern monarch butterfly populations However, we don't see this yet in this site plan. The project's tree trenches, ledges, and green roofs should therefore contain common milkweed. Right now, there is no insurance of this. All plants should be native to the Mid-Atlantic region. To increase biophilia, native vines should hang from the roofs, ledges, and balconies. They should also climb on trellises from the ground and from ledges. The project will contain a park or plaza at the north end of Irving Street. However, if not prevented, construction of that facility will destroy a natural area on county property that now contains much common milkweed, as well as other plants that support pollinators. This is my main point of this talk. The county created that natural area in 2020, only 3 years ago, when adding a green street when completing the Wilson and Washington Boulevard intersection Clarendon Circle project. The county and the applicant must protect and preserve this natural area to support the Monarch Pledge and to enhance biophilia, rather than to reduce its size or replace it with a paved plaza or a new park with different plantings, as Mr. Tarter has shown in his presentation. The county's Department of Parks and Recreation, in conjunction with the applicant, will conduct a public engagement process that will determine the size, use, and design of the park or plaza, and will probably follow Mr. Tarter's presentation. Please ensure that the county board will review the DPR's plan for this public space before they go forward. Otherwise, you're going to defeat the Monarch Plan, the whole purpose of the whole Monarch Plan. This is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. And if I could ask anyone else who is joining us remotely, please make sure you are muted or microphones off until you are recognized to speak.
All right, our next and final speaker is Jason Schwartz.
Hi, I'm Jason Schwartz, and I support this project. This is going to be a nice improvement for the block and a critical connector to tie in together Clarendon and Virginia Square. I run along Wilson every day, and the sidewalk is very narrow and dangerous. Cars speed by, and the sidewalk is overcrowded. I have to watch out for bus mirrors, which sometimes protrude above the sidewalk. I also regularly see people carrying Trader Joe's bags walking across this area all the way into Virginia Square in Ballston. Of course, I wish the buildings would be much taller. It's sad to see only 11 stories for this prime location. Many of the future residential buildings in the development pipeline are well below the recommended GLUP heights due to the current interest rate environment, materials, labor, and other costs. For example, River House, Inn at Roslyn, and Red Lion Inn are all well below the height limits. I'm really not looking forward to seeing 7-story stick-built market rate buildings on some of the most valuable land in the entire state. This site plan may not even be feasible in today's environment, which is something to look out for. Having sector plans that barely make it feasible to build to the max heights adds extra costs and limits the public benefits, including the much needed housing supply. This site plan streetscape improvements are much needed and going to be a huge step forward, but there still could be so much more that could be done, like protected bike lanes, and of course we can get way more cats and a lot of the things that other commenters are saying we could get if we have really the actually appropriate density on the site. This plan has taken pretty long to get approved, a lot of different things that have gone into it to make it more difficult, and that cost is ultimately borne out by renters. The county overall is 62% renters, and the Clarendon Courthouse Civic Association is 75% renters. People that living in these buildings should really have more of a say in how these buildings are designed in the built area around them, not just token input, for minor sort of things. We should have really a greater say. Renters that seeking to live in Arlington are not pesky burdens, but vital assets that make our community great, and the designs and buildings should really reflect that and those preferences. In the past year, according to RentHop, rents in the Clarendon Metro Station are up 12%, which is a really large gap. But we see in other places where they're actually building substantial density, like Navy Yard, the rents are only up 2% year over year, and in places like Noma, rents have actually declined 6% year over year. So in closing, I'm really happy to see this finally be ready for approval, but we really got to think long term and really look to build more housing and really make our community next level up and not just settle for typical improvements. So we can really go even next level. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. And that concludes our public testimony. Mr. Kushner?
Correct.
Therefore, the discussion is now with the board. Colleagues, to facilitate our conversation, perhaps there are questions and comments that you'll have about this. As I was listening to the presentations and the testimony, it seems that generally comments or questions related to the site plan, which includes architecture, the new 10th 10th Road North would be in order, and as well as the mid-block crossing recommendations that came from both the Transportation and Planning Commission. There are the modifications that are being requested here, which are centered around the increase in density as well as the reduction in required loading spaces and parking reductions, and some of the design modifications, most notably transparency, distance of entrances, as well as setbacks. There's community benefits. So basically, I'm going to group these in a few different buckets. The first bucket is anything about the site, including its architecture, the new road. Any questions, comments? Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm really one set of questions and then some concluding thoughts. The question I think is for staff. I also want to just thank the applicant. I know that there's been some work on circulation in 10th Road. We had some conversations there. Really, it's I think maybe Mr. Tartar had. I just want to confirm on Wilson Boulevard how the traffic will work in that space. There's a few parking spaces, and then there's what appears to be a rather lengthy place where you can drop off or arrive. And I don't know whether that's a slide that the applicant has, Mr. Tartar can show, but the question is, it's basically, we did some analysis of traffic to make sure that as you're dropping off, we wouldn't have double parking, we wouldn't have traffic stuck in that intersection, and instead would have a place where taxis and drop-offs can occur for some 10, 20, 30 yards, where you could pull to the right, get off of the main traffic area. Am I understanding that right? Do I have a sense of the scale of the number of yards or the number of cars that might fit because I just can imagine you would have multiple customers coming in at one time. I'm not sure which of you is best for that question, but that's what I thought I saw, and I don't know if I've accurately described what I saw in Mr. Tartar's. And I probably would start with staff, and if the applicant has anything that you all wanted to add. Want to see if I've got the big picture right on traffic and car traffic there.
Absolutely. I think you do have a good description of what's occurring. We'll maintain the 4 lanes of traffic on Wilson Boulevard and provide roughly, I think it's 6 to 7 on-street parking spaces that can be used for short-term pickup and drop-off at the hotel entrance. As part of the most recent updates to the plan, that area has been widened from 7 feet wide to 8 feet wide to provide additional space for hotel operations. This should provide a safe and accessible place for hotel patrons to arrive and depart. Additionally, there is proposed space and a hotel entrance on the new 10th Street connection. So there's multiple locations to support arrival and departure, potential valet operations, and the safe movement of vehicles without obstructing pedestrian flow.
Great, that's very helpful. And just one follow-up for the applicant. I'm not sure who's best to answer this. If I understand the changes for this final iteration, there's a Wilson Street entrance and there's an entrance off of 10th Street. And do you have a sense of how you would anticipate that those coming to the hotel would divide in terms of whether they would go to the 10th Street side or the Wilson Street side? I think Wilson is a larger entrance, but I also, there's some space in the drawings that I've seen that we see regarding the 10th Street side. Is there any anticipated breakdown in how folks would enter, or do you have any comments regarding the traffic as it relates to those 2 entrances?
I'm not sure we really have an idea how this is going to break down one entrance versus the other. But I do think having 2 entrances kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. If there's too much, if the parking is stacked up, it's full, you've got another place you can pull into. So I think the notion is just to have porosity on the site and porosity to get into the building.
Great, thanks, Mr.
And I
Chair.
believe we have another comment here in the room, Mr. DeFranti.
Yeah, the primary entrance is going to be on Wilson Boulevard. There isn't a breakdown, but as Dave just pointed out, there's a lot of porosity to this site, a lot of entrances coming in and going, so there's going to be choices.
Great, thanks very much. I know that was an adjustment and a big source of consideration, and I very much appreciate that. That's my only question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions, along the, or as a follow-up to Mr. DeFrance's question. So, two things. First of all, we have heard from the commissions, and to the degree I followed the conversation at the Planning Commission, the pedestrian crosswalk from the 10th across Wilson Boulevard was a desired feature, and even the applicant, I didn't have the impression, correct me, you didn't object to that, you actually were okay with that.
No objections?
Yeah, no objections.
So why do we have objections? And I understand, why do we have objections specifically to deliver that with this site plan as opposed to different?
Absolutely.
Time.
So Wilson Boulevard's a 4-lane roadway, and within those circumstances, we recommend that pedestrian crossings be signalized. So this project, widening not just the project side of the street, but also the west side of the street, will provide us ultimately an opportunity to significantly improve the pedestrian feel and accommodations there. It will also provide us long-term space to put that needed signalization. But in part, one of the things that we want to focus at opening of the building, pedestrians to the existing crossings. As the western side of the Clarendon sector plan builds out, we do see a need for a potential connection through the Kirby block and the North Side Social block. At that point, we think it's the appropriate time to signalize and open that crossing. But without the broader connectivity westward into and towards Fairfax, we think it's appropriate to keep the existing crossings at Wilson and 10th, at Clarendon Circle and then at 10th. And then as the western side continues to redevelop and there's a pedestrian connection that's created through the existing private property, then you have the appropriate broader network connectivity and density of pedestrians crossing to support that signalization. But this project commits to ensuring that there's the space within the streetscape design and room for future signalization as we go to final engineering for this project.
So to make sure that I understand it properly, the space to produce a crossing at a later point will be prepared in this project or not at all? Or
That is the intention.
That's the intention. And how do we ensure that this is part of the engineering and the detailed work between the applicant and staff?
That's correct.
Correct. A second question has also to do with pedestrian crossings. In the sector plan that we approved last year, and even in the diagrams and graphic representations here, there is a traffic island, a traffic median, right between the entrance of the hotel, so the top of the corner, and where the Fairfax Drive location, where the Northside Social location. There is a median drawn in. Is that something that is happening, or is it going to happen at some time?
I'm not sure if I'm following it correctly, but what I can say is the county's just completed a very major capital improvement to the Clarendon Circle. That was informed by, in part, the Clarendon sector plan, and it did not include that median. I think you're saying in Wilson, or
this is on Wilson. Yes, I can show you that. This is here.
Yes, I understand. I think that, I mean, the illustrative drawings presented initially with the sector plan have been superseded by detailed engineering to deliver the improvements at Clarendon Circle.
The median lives in the drawings that were part of this. So this is there.
I understand the illustrative nature of the drawings, but we do not propose making further changes to Clarendon Circle at this time.
Okay. I will try to follow up on
Yeah,
this.
why don't you
It's not
follow
a
up
deal
since
breaker, yes.
we weren't able to see what you were showing, so many people are a little lost. Yeah, we'll take care of it later. I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right, Vice Chair Garvey.
Yeah, quick question, just following up, just making sure I understand, because what I'm hearing, I think, is the Planning Commission and the applicant actually saying the mid-block crossing would be a good idea, we should do it, Planning Commission saying plan for it, we should plan for it. And I think what I hear you saying is we are planning for it, we're just not going to do it right now. Is that correct? That whatever needs to be sort of done ahead of time is being done ahead of time, you're just not implementing it until you're sure it's needed. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, so actually the request of the Planning Commission has sort of been met, as I understand it, I think. All right. Mr. Lynn, tell me, thank you.
Yeah, what we want, the way it's being planned now, it'll look like you can cross there, but there'll be no signals at all. People will cross. We're very concerned that traffic on Wilson there does move pretty fast. We've heard from some of the public commenters that it really doesn't feel safe. People will cross though, because as they walk out the lobbies of both the hotel and the apartment building, they're going to see Northside Social right there. So they're going to want to cross. It's a popular place. We feel that even if you don't put a full traffic signal, maybe putting right now the flashing lights for pedestrian crossing would really advance pedestrian safety tremendously. If we're looking at Vision Zero, this I think is a prime spot to prevent accidents, to prevent problems from the start, where we have a large number of people, both guests in the hotel, which if it's successful, that a lot of people are there, and this is a very big apartment building, which is going to generate a lot of residents. We think that now is really the time for safety purposes to put something in while we have the opportunity, and it should be fairly easy to do. We don't think there's a reason really to wait. The St. Charles site, which is on the other side of Northside Social and the Kirby Garage, is moving through. That'll be a large residential project. The Fairfax Drive, the county's already planning to convert that into a park, a linear park. These are all people magnets that let's just go ahead and put some sort of signal in now and evaluate later whether it has to be upgraded to a formal red light, green light.
Thank you. All right, so that means actually you want to implement, I'm fine going forward as we are, but I think encouraging staff, it's going to take a while to get this built, but I think what you say makes a whole lot of sense, so we'll see where we get, and maybe if we don't build that mid-block crossing and we don't want people, we're going to need to put something to make it like, don't go here for a while. So we'll, I think, keep that under advisement. That's fine, I think, on this item for me. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Talento.
I want to apologize in advance, Chair Dorsey, because I know you were trying to categorize it, but I could not catch where we were. So I'm going to try to stay within the piece.
Just do
okay.
You do you.
First, I want to thank the developer, the applicant for the thoughtfulness in investing in the Clarendon community, putting on-site CAF units. Just such a deep appreciation for that. I know that you had choices, and deeply appreciate that you chose that, understanding the values that our community really seeks in the work that we're doing as we develop Arlington, and the efforts that you made to really bring in more of the green, the trees and the foliage to the property in a place that is existing today with really nothing there. And not only are you bringing it to the sidewalkscape, but also to the building with your rooftop and your terrace. And those are also choices that you made. And just want to thank you for investing in our community in alignment with the values that we seek as Arlingtonians here. Just a big thank you for that, because developers have choices and there are requirements, and then there's those who go above those. So just a big thank you on that. Regarding the crosswalk piece, I would want to learn more about where the entrances are going to be, and I worry that the plans that we see today, those types of entry points and exit points could change as you start to build. And so I would just want to make sure that when we do put a crosswalk on this strip, we're doing it at a place that aligns with entry and exit points of the buildings. I'm not against the crosswalk. I think we should definitely be thoughtful of that, especially as we're making it supporting the walkable community that it is. People be going, increasing the neighborhood residents, et cetera. But for instance, if the hotel entry is on the corner of Wilson, where the current Silver Diner is, and the building entrance is on the corner of 10th and Wilson, I'm not sure if a crosswalk would be required. We would have those lights. We would have a good crosswalk in existence. There's a driveway that looks to be in between. People may not want to cross there, but if, as you're developing the building, you find that the entry really should be moved over 10 feet towards the middle, that makes sense. I just think that making sure, and I want to apologize for my ignorance and not fully understanding the site planning process quite yet, but I support a crosswalk, and I support a crosswalk being put in after we know what the development looks like and where our entry and exit points will be, to ensure that we're putting it in the best place possible for walkability and safety for our pedestrians. With that being said, if we know that during construction, it'd be great to implement that at the time. And so, again, apologies for my ignorance if all of this is already in process and I'm just reiterating what we're doing, but I just want to clarify where I am thinking as a board member. And I think that's really on the architecture and the design and the crossing, that's where I am. Just again, thank you really for investing in our community in a way that truly aligns with multiple values. And one more thing, I encourage you, because we don't know when this will come to fruition based on the current market interest rates, et cetera, green energy is moving quickly. So at the time of build, if there are opportunities for you to increase climate-friendly production of your building and energy sources to your building, I would encourage you to look at those, because it would be great to support a better climate efforts for Arlington and in our area, considering the challenges that we face today. Thank you, Dr. Chair Dorsey. I want to keep calling you doctor. You know, I mean.
Okay, my only question regarding the site layout, site plan is really a question for the applicant and your transportation folks. And Mr. Gibson, I'd love if you would opine as well. When you do an MMTA these days, and you're determining what are the, future possibilities and how it'll affect levels of service, are there any changes that you're implementing in the analysis that are based on, different norms for working from home? How is that affecting your analysis of peak period trips, given that we essentially have a fundamentally different way that people are engaging with commutes?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but our traffic consultant probably does. Dan, would you be able to address that question?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thank you. I think one of the things that we're doing, and what we do is when we go through the scoping process for the MMTA, we work with staff to really try to drill down on what we think those modal splits are going to be. And I think that is something that we have seen quite a bit of change in with the pandemic and post-pandemic. But what a lot of what has happened is really when we've had people switch from transit usage to teleworking. So it's really from an auto to non-auto standpoint. We're still seeing similar auto trips, but what's happened is that those transit users are now teleworking. But that's something that we go through very carefully, and I think that when each study we look at that and we try to look at what the latest data is telling us, and we'll determine what those mode splits want to be, and work with staff to pin those down before we use them in the MMTA.
I appreciate that, and your analysis confirms what I've heard elsewhere, that unfortunately telework seems to be cannibalizing transit and not auto usage. So that's something just for our entire region to wrap our heads around. I was going to move into the modifications, but if there's anything else about the site plan, go ahead, Mr. Karantonis.
I don't know if this is appropriate place to ask that. It's about the tree canopy and the treatment.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a little, I mean, as I was seeing the renderings, especially on the corner between, what's that, Wilson and so right at the corner to the Clarendon Circle, there is sometimes we see trees on that corner, and sometimes we don't. What is it? It's right after the parking bay in front of the entrance of the hotel.
So we've got a landscape consultant on here. I don't know whether Lynn or Gabrielle, you'd like to address that. I can also put up, my images are colored and rendered, and they may have better, they may show better than yours, Courtney. But Lynn
Yes.
or Gabrielle, would you like to address that?
Yes, this is Lynn Halabi from Land Design. Thank you, David. So these plans actually show the latest technical drawings that show exactly how many trees that we'd need with the right soil calculations, and so that the trees that we'd have would be those two big trees.
Don't you find, so there won't be any, so here, don't you find that this tree-less distance, so first of all, in other renderings, we see trees just next to these, unload bays, pickup and drop-off bays, but don't you find that's a very long distance without any tree canopy? What's the thinking behind that? Does it show the entrance of the hotel better? Is that covering, or why don't we plan for trees there?
So I can speak to that from a staff perspective, what we looked at. So backing up a little bit, we had some goals of the sector plan that were important for us to meet. One of them was delivering a commercial location, which the hotel is doing. And so it was a priority to ensure that we were supporting that. A second one was to ensure that the loading functions were all internal to the block to maintain the pedestrian connection, particularly on Irving. So we went through this long process with the applicant to look at reorienting the loading functions, and we're able to put it internal to the block on 10th Road North. In doing that, we also reoriented the hotel lobby to have the main entrance on Wilson Boulevard. As we were going through having the reorientation of the main lobby on Wilson, the applicant expressed a desire to have the pickup drop-off loading spaces on Wilson right outside the entry point of the lobby, which we understood from our perspective. We also looked at how to achieve the streetscape goals of the sector plan. And so I'm going to take back my screen really quick to look at the plan view of that. So we looked at, as you see here, kind of pairing up the trees to try to maximize the tree canopy together. So we have two kind of tree pairs on either end of those parking spaces. We also looked at reducing the sidewalk width along that stretch of the hotel. And there were some challenges with that because of some utility placements, and also because we were running afoul with reducing the clear width goals of the sector plan. And we were also wanted to make sure that the visibility of the hotel lobby wasn't compromised. And so kind of all those factors, this is where we ended up, and we feel that it's an appropriate relationship of the building to the street.
Thank you. Not a deal breaker, but I really think that we have ways to combine a good presentation of the lobby with trees. Especially, I've seen in many places now the tree wells are covered with grates that are of the type that invite to walk on them. I mean, they're absolutely friendly to that. They're not a barrier anymore, and the tree growth itself creates such a nice juxtaposition of the glass and designed interior of the hotel and a more natural presentation. This entire circle is not very canopy friendly, right? So I just encourage you to look at this with more open-minded and try to maybe improve on this. Nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to modifications, I'll start us off. Ms. Badger, can you Tell me a little bit about why we believe that the loading plan for 3 spaces overall is sufficient. I understand that for the residential and retail uses, there is this belief that 2 spaces should be adequate for that because those loading functions typically happen at different times. But as it relates to the hotel use, having 1 loading function, that seems intuitively to me as to be insufficient. And so can you just talk a little bit more about why we believe that 3 instead of 5, as would be otherwise required, is going to be sufficient for this project?
So looking at the uses, this has been a very hard balance between the space that loading takes up along our frontages and the uses in the buildings. We think that this is the appropriate balance in this project. We also recognize that the project is delivering 2 new internal streets that will help support those loading docks. And if there is any overflow of loading operations, those overflows will occur on either the private alley in the rear of between the 2 buildings or on 10th Road, which would have the lowest impact on the overall flow of traffic in the area and pedestrian impacts. So we think this strikes the right balance in this case.
And as we're determining that, is there any sort of analysis that we use for different functions? So did we evaluate the needs of a hotel specifically in determining the adequacy here?
So we have a lot of experience with this in the county. There is not a spreadsheet that we fill out per se, but we do have a consideration of all the different uses, whether it be trash or loading. The good thing about a hotel use at this corner versus a commercial building or a residential building, you don't have the move-ins and outs that you would have in a full residential building that might need an extra space. So we believe that the trash and the loading operations for the hotel use in this case could occur concurrently, and then the alley and the loading dock will support the proposed residential building.
I appreciate it, but we don't have a specific metric that looks at, for example, hotels have linen service, trash service, food delivery service. If they're different shops within the hotel, they have their different service needs. We don't have a different framework for assessing them versus, for example, a retail store.
We do have more of a professional sort of judgment type analysis. We do take all of that into consideration, and we also take into consideration the surrounding network and spaces. So if this use, for instance, didn't have those extra internalized streets and only had loading operations on Wilson Boulevard, for instance, our analysis for recommending fewer bays may actually be different.
Okay. Thank you. Other modification questions, concerns, comments? Mr. DeFerranti?
This is a green question, so we can, it's a question regarding the rooftop. So I don't know that that's a modification.
Go for it. You got the floor.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So this question just occurred to me as a second, which is this, I believe it's the apartments have a green roof. I wonder if there's a member of the team who could speak to whether you considered solar panels in that space as opposed to the roof.
So I'm going to,
oh, sorry. Who's talking?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, we're considering photovoltaics on it, and fortunately, right now, there is now a capability of doubling it, so you can actually have green roof underneath photovoltaics. There's certain types of plants that function that way, and we're exploring that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That certainly would reach a couple of board members if we could do both, and I'm mindful of the upfront cost, but also the medium to long-term benefit. So that's certainly of interest as I think about the environmental piece to this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Of course. I'd like to bring up density for a minute. Mr. Schwartz, I appreciate your comments earlier about, not to be reductionist, but reductive, but to max out this site. And just to explore that a little bit, Ms. Badger, for you, so it's my working understanding that, what we have here governing is board flexibility to add density, but up to a statutory height limit of 110 feet. And when you combine that with the sector plan goals for step backs, which we're already seeking modifications to relieve those in some instances, we're kind of maxing out the density envelope here. Is that a fair approach?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you. Any other questions about modifications or design? Anybody concerned about step backs or the requested reductions for distance from building entrances? You're good. Excellent. We can talk about community benefits. Any questions, concerns, comments about those? Yeah, why don't we put that here? I think that's part of community benefits because the relief or the actions that would be sought are probably in that vein.
Yeah, great, thank you. I guess I have the floor, it sounds like, thank you. And actually, it's just really following up where we left off. I was really pleased to hear you say that you're looking at solar over the green roofs, because I think that is actually having a solar panel over a green roof apparently increases the efficiency of the solar panel by something like 15 or 20%. So I'm hoping that you can do that. Plus, it shades everybody, it's a good thing. Could you talk a little bit about, Ms. McIntyre is, of course, always talking to us about having all electric buildings, and I believe you're considering different alternatives for, what you're doing inside, whether it's going to be gas or whether you might go all electric or what you're going to do. Could you talk a little bit more about your thought process and when you might decide, and could you lean electric?
I think it goes down to the marketability and what is your competition in the area. For the hotel itself, the food and beverage operations, typically most of the equipment is gas, and that's just the way it is today. In terms of the residential, we're going to be looking at some options, whether it's gas or all electric. Some of the central building systems still work very efficiently on gas, unfortunately. And from an energy conservation standpoint, they tend to work very well. But we haven't gotten to the details on that right now, and we're looking at those. So we're going to explore as much as we can. I think from it's in most residential today, it's like a 50-50 split, but in terms of market rate, that is, between gas and electric for the convenience of cooking in the units themselves. But the tendency is going towards all electric. So we'll be looking at that.
Thank you. Right, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I'm thinking over time, and actually a short period of time, I think we're going to push more and more to electric in it. So it may be by the time you actually get to really looking at it, electric will make more sense.
Yeah, and recent studies too about the induction heating versus gas heating, that the fallacy between the two of those, that the induction method is just as effective as gas. And so people are starting to come around to that.
Right. Well, thank you. I hope you continue to sort of push the envelope. And I'm really pleased to see the green roofs and see what's there. I think more green. Mr. Carantonis has talked about more trees. A few plants on balconies and things would be good. But I'm really pleased to see what you are doing. Thank you. Thanks for telling me your thought processes.
Mr. Carantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the vein of the same conversation, I appreciate your openness to translucent photovoltaic arrays so that you have a more viable, also better serviceable green roof. And I appreciate that you recognize that induction technology is a very efficient and an equally convenient way to deliver in a residential setting. I do believe that, so the question here is, are you accounting for a future full electrification of both buildings and both operations, including the commercial kitchen? Because I believe that commercial induction, actually induction started in the commercial world. It was expensive for individuals. So do we account for being able to retrofit the building relatively easily.
We haven't gotten to that level of specific design, but it could be a consideration to look into that. At this point, it's, for the commercial kitchen portions of it, and this goes to, potential F&B or food and beverage retailers. We can't really restrict that. We're going to have to provide the option of doing both in those cases. In terms of the hotel, I don't know enough about the hotel operator and whether they're going to be able to convert that, but we're not planning for it at this point, no.
It will be an awesome advertisement for a green city hotel, because you are offering something that's very rare. You offer transparency. People will be able to see in the kitchen, and it says something when you don't see the typical greasy, hot gas stoves, but you see something that is sleek and elegant and actually allows for great food to be prepared there. It's actually in front of everybody, and actually this is something that you can, it's an awesome feature that would help a lot with the image of the hotel as well, not only with its energy efficiency. Thank you.
As someone who's worked in a commercial kitchen, I can assure my colleague that it's not the fuel source which determines whether or not something is greasy, so don't worry.
Granted, but typically a place that's designed for induction tends to be a little bit cleaner, and it's far more friendly to the operators because the residual heat that comes out is less.
So are you ready for a motion?
I am.
All right, great.
And it's going to be a long one because it has two parts. So, I'm pleased to move to approve the ordinance attached to staff report to this agenda item, number 53, for the Bingham Center site plan, that's SPLN 21-00009, SP number 467, to permit construction on approximately 5.10 FAR, including up to 254,097 square feet of residential floor area at 290 dwelling units, 143,564 square feet of hotel floor area, 229 rooms, and 16,169 square feet of retail floor area, located generally at 3200 Wilson Boulevard. That's RPC numbers 19-003, 003, 004, 005, 007, 008, 013, 014, 015, and part of RPC number 19-003, 002, -006, -009, and -016, with modifications for additional density, reduced residential and retail parking ratios, density exclusions, design requirements, and other modifications necessary to achieve the proposed development. In addition, I move to approve the ordinances of vacation attached the staff report to this agenda item, number 453, to vacate, first, a 1,429 square feet portion of a 12-foot wide public alley located between Wilson Boulevard and 10th Street North, adjacent to 3200 and 3240 Wilson Boulevard. These are RPCs numbers 19-003, -006, -007-013. Secondly, to vacate a 3,171 square feet portion of a 12-foot wide public alley located between Wilson Boulevard and 10th Street North, adjacent to 3258 and 3260 Wilson Boulevard, and 3211 and 3217 10th Street North, RPC numbers 19-003-002 and 003-005, 015, and 016. And third, a 1,586 square feet portion of the public street and utilities easement on the south side of Wilson Boulevard and the west side of North Irving Street of property identified as 3200 Wilson Boulevard, RPC numbers 19003-007, 0-008-013, with all with conditions. In addition, to authorize the Real Estate Bureau Chief, Department of Environmental Services, or his designee, to execute on behalf of the County Board the deeds of vacation and any other documents necessary to effectuate the ordinances attached to the staff report on this agenda item, and subject to approval of all documents as to form by the county attorney.
All right,
That's
the chair
the
will second. Thank you, Mr. Karantonis, and for those of you
Mr.
following.
Chair, sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry.
One question, I believe, for staff. It looks like there is a discrepancy between the square footage in the board report and the recommendation on the website. And so I wanted to see what would be the correct one so we can adopt in the motion. I believe what Mr. Karantonis read was from the, I think you read it from the website, actually.
I copied from.
So the vacation square footage is at 1,429 square feet? Is that what we're referring to?
I am referring to the site plan and the square footage for residential versus hotel floor area.
Oh, I see.
Of the board report? 'Cause it doesn't match. Yeah.
What's the difference, do you know, in the two numbers?
The board report says 254,132 square feet of residential.
Yeah.
The website says
097.
097. Same with hotel. Board report says 168. Website says 564. So it sounds like we're going with what is in the board report. All right, so just want to make sure that the motion properly incorporates that.
Okay, so to sum up, then, Mr. Karantonis has just
accept-
moved
yeah.
county manager's recommendations in the board report dated September 15, 2023. Would that suffice?
Yes.
And I will continue to second. And we are now ready to move to consideration of the motion. Is there anything further that you would like to say, Mr. Karantonis?
I will try to be brief. That was an exciting study for me in this project. And before I talk about the project, let me just dwell briefly on the urban context of the proposed development. This intersection of Wilson, Clarendon, and Washington Boulevards, it's one of the most challenging intersections in our county, right at the fault line between a very lively pedestrian, cyclist frequented space and what is, in my opinion, a vast expanse of asphalted mix of three major arterials that are reserved right now only to car traffic. So I'm pointing this out because such great development projects like Bingham here, like Joyce Motors, like the future Wells Fargo site, like the Red Top, like the St. Charles site that Mr. Lantelme mentioned, and they already completed building across Clarendon Circle. All this invites to some continuous thinking about this intersection and its traffic patterns, relationships to the very different level of urbanism that Bingham actually delivered. And speaking of this, with this development, and Mr. Schultz was really kind to share the story of his friend and past resident, Mr. Bingham. I'm very grateful for this background information, contextual information. So the urbanism that makes the urbanism of Clarendon finally arriving to the western corner of the sector and has all the potential to be as successful, popular, and frankly exciting as the immediately adjacent sectors along Clarendon and Wilson to the metro station and beyond. I can't overstate, and I align myself with the comments of Ms. Talento, how welcome of an investment this is to see a hotel anchoring this intersection, And anchoring means and includes the function of this project being, to me, a nexus between the Clarendon Plaza and the expanding George Mason campus and the new Fusion building, the FDIC complex. This is the context I see the proposal of adding additional pedestrian facilities, including a crosswalk. And I look forward to further pursue that. By approving this proposal, we are delivering a significant piece of the missing connection between Clarendon West and Virginia Square. I can't wait to see the final piece of the Fairfax Drive linear park, delivering this handshake between these two sectors. What I propose to approve today is as much as completing Clarendon as it's revitalizing in terms of economic and urban development, the eastern section of Virginia Square, and I think this is exciting. Speaking of further good things, I think colleagues will dwell on these as well. It completes the triangular block. I think Mr. Tartar has a point in saying that triangular block is a challenge, but I think it's also a great opportunity to create a significant landmark corner there. I think that I'm not an architect, but I appeal to architects to think about this corner, make it a little bit more exciting. I think it deserves it. Both Clarendon Circle and the project deserves it. It delivers on-site affordable housing units. It delivers a lot of other benefits that are badly needed in this sector in particular. It delivers a park and public space and at the head of Irving, inviting the community to engage, and I know this community will be an active participant in this process, to engage in its design. And I expect a lot of good things to come from this process. And it delivers an intriguing combination. And that's, for me, a very important feature. Intriguing combination of an alley behind a residential building and the 10th Road, which I consider excellent additions to the pedestrian experience and opening opportunities to deliver this secluded alley feel that is known to be very popular and very successful. Therefore, I invite you, as the applicants and our staff, to be very intentional in delivering this distinct pedestrian feel to these spaces and the texture that by choosing the appropriate pavements, the lighting, the landscaping, and on both alley and the road. We talked about the other public benefits, the shared parking, which is as common sense as it is actually very innovative. Thank you for this. And last but not least, Mr. Schultz, I really convinced that the greener building is feasible. And your entire team, I invite you to work, appeal you to work to push this envelope, especially at this corner there. Green City Hotel, as I said before, is a great advertisement and a great presentation of this part of Arlington, and especially so close to the university. This will be a very big success. So I hope, colleagues, you agree that this is a good project worthy of the support and approval of the board, and I leave this there, and I hope you will be supportive. Thank you.
We'll move to Mr. DeFerranti next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Ms. Talento said very well the deep appreciation that I want to share as well on the on-site affordable units. That is there's a choice there, and really appreciate the choice that you've made very much. On the roof, for some, calculating what, quote, pencils out is different at different times. And, as I'm learning about electrification of buildings, there's how you pencil something has a big impact. My instinct is, certainly on the residential side, is that solar on the roof actually feels more familiar to me, at least at this stage, that it pencils out. So I would sort of channel Mr. Karantonis's encouragement to perhaps start there, because I do think that there's a fairly strong case. The C2E2 and Ms. McIntyre's letter I read carefully. I've been on a journey, as you know, of learning more about electric buildings. One thing that I want to just share more for staff is that it's my impression that if your project, I think it's important to have some sense of what's expected when you submit a 4.1 of what is involved. And my impression is that the ASHRAE standard, energy efficiency standard, as of July 1st, you submitted well before July 1st, but as of July 1st, would bump up from 20 to 25%. And I'll share in an email with colleagues and staff that I wanted to say it out loud because it will impact my views with respect to projects that are submitted after July 1st. And then because we had an automatic update in our green building incentive policy 3 years ago that we put in there, and then we will have, I hope, significant discussion about the other pieces of our green building incentive policy. The electric vehicles, I hear wanting to get to 50%. I certainly feel like our standard right now is lower than we need to be going forward. And so I'm eager for that full rewrite. And then on electric buildings, I commit to continuing the work. But that is policy related. I think it's important to focus on one of the two defining challenges of our time in climate, in addition to equity and affordability. And that brings me to my last point, which is which Mr. Schwartz and Mr. Berwick touched on. For your generation, now that I've just turned 50 earlier this week, I can't claim to be in your generation, but for all generations, affordability is a huge challenge. And if we do not add housing supply, the American dream in terms of long-term rental or eventual ownership will be less and less attainable. And interim rents, which were all of my 20s and 30s, will be less and less affordable. So this adds to housing supply very proximate to transit, and happy to support it. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll just say in closing a couple of, you're good? Okay, I'll say a couple things in closing.
I do have some closing remarks too.
You're going to get the last.
I'm the last one? Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna look.
Deal.
See,
All
you can't
right.
see my plan?
I always think the chair goes last. Go for it.
No. That's a burden that I should not always carry. So, this is what I'd like to call a clean site plan. Clean site plan. At the end of the day, you've got staff, which offers basically an unqualified recommendation to support, and the issues that have been outlined by our advisory commissions are fairly narrow and not necessarily ones that cannot be fulfilled depending upon the realization of future conditions, as is the case with the mid-block crossing. And to have none of the adjacent abutting civic associations having submitted a letter or showing up to talk about it is just incredible. I think we've had a couple of these this year, which is pretty remarkable given, one, the centrality of this site, and really the dynamic uses that are envisioned with both retail and residential in one building, and then a hotel use that doesn't exist in the area. So congratulations on having kind of a clean site plan before us. And I think, Mr. Tarter, the community benefits are a significant feature, I think, of what does have people excited. The on-site CAFs and the 15 that will be delivered, 2/3 of which will be, 2 bedrooms, 2-bedroom units. It's a great thing. I'll also remind people that the base affordable housing contribution is also a part of this, which is going to be delivered in the form of a significant amount of cash, or at the applicant's prerogative, could also be delivered in terms of on-site units. So these are very, very good things for the Clarendon community, which is devoid of housing that has been available at price points that meet the diverse needs of our community. I love the streetscape improvements that are coming in this area. As someone who used to occupy an office that will be redeveloped as part of this, I'm very familiar with this area, very familiar with Mr. Lantelmi, don't tell anyone, crossing to get to Northside Social, so I do know a bit about what you're talking about. But these improvements are not only going to be welcome aesthetically, I think it's also going to make for a much safer experience for pedestrians, for people who are waiting for the bus, which picks up by the, which picks up across the street where people have very narrow conditions to exist in. This is great stuff. And just overall, the sector plan goals that we affirmed and updated with last year's process to improve the public realm, to create accessible and connected conditions, and also to have a dynamic mix of uses. This is all being realized with this project, so I look forward, hopefully, to seeing it in the years ahead, and I'm happy to support it today. Ms. Garvey, the last word.
Thank you. Almost everything's been said, but not quite, actually. So, Mr. Schultz, you and I go way back. It's been a while. And in some ways, it looks beautiful. It's a clean site plan. Everybody's improving. Everything's wonderful. But many people don't have an idea of what it took to get to this point. And I know it was a lot of work, and not all of it fun, not all of it easy. I really, really appreciate the work that you did with our staff and with everyone. I think in the end, it's not quite exactly what you had envisioned, and it is a cool vision that you've got. Really pleased that you're bringing it to Arlington, but I think it's going to really work for everybody, and really have to thank you a lot for the work that you went through, and with our staff for, I know, going back and forth quite a bit, because it wasn't easy. I think those transparent windows, I think those are going to be cool, and the plaza is going to be great. And I just, as I say, the work that went into this is really kind of remarkable, and I think we are getting more and more that we have site plans. I think people are kind of figuring it out. Thank you for the work on green, all of the green. I hope we do get a little bit further along, but you've really taken it a long way. Thank you for bringing this kind of vision of a really upscale hotel to this part of Arlington, which needs it. And I found, looking at the pictures, reminded, I don't know about other people, but I kind of get a kick out of sometimes watching these decorating things. They have the before pictures and the after pictures, And this one, I mean, those before, the streetscapes we've got there right now, I mean, it's just nobody quite, so it's downright ugly. I mean, it's just horrible. And this is a huge, huge improvement when it gets built. So thank you. And thanks to the Planning Commission, and we'll see about that mid-street crossing. We don't want to take out any of our county board members or anybody crossing that street, so we'll continue to work on that as well. So just thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Finally, last note, Mayor Tarter, I know you wear a couple of hats, not heads, one head, two hats. And you're also mayor of Falls Church, and I think today is the 100th anniversary, or having a celebration for the 100th anniversary. So from your sister jurisdiction in Arlington, happy birthday to Falls Church City, and thank you very much, and get better. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we're now ready to move to a vote on Mr. Karantonis' motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, 5-0. Congratulations. Thank you all, and hope you have a great day and get home and steel yourself for bad weather. Mr. Schultz?
Just so you know that I do have the ability to speak here. I've been pretty quiet today, but I do want to, first of all, thank all of you county board members. It's been a long, hard grind on this one here, and appreciate all the time you spent, making yourselves available for various meetings, and informal as well as formal.
Great.
And the staff, what a job. Where'd the staff go? They're already gone, but I want to thank the staff for everything that they've done. It's been always a difficult challenge, but good outcome. We all know that what makes Arlington so special are the citizens and the Citizens Association. So I want to particularly thank them. Clarendon Courthouse, Lyon Park, Lyon Village, Ashton Heights, Ballston, Virginia Square. We've had so many meetings, and these projects, this is true of every project I've ever done, these projects are always better because of that collaboration. We don't always agree, but for some reason it always comes out a better project.
Thank you so very much. We appreciate it.
Two more things.
One last thing. How about one last thing?
I want to thank my team. I won't mention them all, but they know who they are. Some of the key people are here. And my partners, the Donahoe partners. But finally, I want to thank Bingham F. Berner. Bing Berner, who this project is named after. This project, he trusted in me 33 years ago, and he is the epitome of what Clarendon is all about. Sophisticated, educated, creative, and funky. If you didn't get the chance to meet Bing Berner, you'll learn more about him through this project.
Thank you so much.
His memory will be remembered for years to come. Thank
Beautiful.
you all.
All right, be safe.
Thank you.
Mr. Kushner, are you ready to call our
Thanks very much.
item?
Item number 54, SPLA 23-00017 is a site plan amendment number 167 to revise condition language related to rooftop signs located at 2011 Crystal Drive and 2231 Crystal Drive.
Okay. Mr. Schwartz, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We do, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn it over to Emma Martin in a second, but I did want to note for everybody out there listening, this is an item that talks a little bit about giving property owners access to some of the changes in the zoning ordinance that have been made subsequent to earlier adoptions of site plans, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that next month. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Emma. Over to you.
And thank you, Ms. Martin. Please be sure to press the button so that your microphone is on. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Good morning. Give me a second to pull up this PowerPoint. Let's see if it's working. No? Sorry for this delay. Good morning, I'm Emma Martin with Arlington County CPHD. I'll be presenting the Crystal Park Rooftop Signage Condition Minor Site Plan Amendment today. Site Plan number 167, known as Crystal Park, was approved by the County Board in 1980 and has been amended several times. Currently, the site plan consists of 5 office buildings, 4 residential buildings, along with several retail kiosks and pavilions that are under construction. All of the office buildings have had rooftop signs installed depicting the names of tenants, which have evolved over the life of the buildings. Several of the office buildings are subject to separate county board approvals for individual rooftop signs, and there's a comprehensive sign plan that impacts multiple site plans in Crystal City, including the subject site plan number 167. The applicants are requesting a site plan amendment to remove 2 conditions related to rooftop signage for the Crystal Park 1 and Crystal Park 3 office buildings with this request. The subject buildings, Crystal Park 1 and 3, have conditions specific to rooftop signs, which are shown on the slide. The applicant's requesting to remove these 2 conditions related to signage to allow signs to be permitted with administrative approval by the zoning division and subject to the standards of the Arlington County zoning ordinance rather than the previously approved site plan conditions that are more restrictive than the current ordinance. This is the current rooftop signage for both Crystal Park 1 and 3. A zoning ordinance amendment was approved in July 2012, as our manager just stated, which revised the sign regulations. Some highlights of the amendments were that they added a new format and for organization of the regulations, they refined regulations to incorporate additional flexibility, facilitated creativity and innovation, as well as the ability to allow administrative approval for most signs. It also codified consistent administrative practices not reflected in the ordinance and incorporated some new standards and technology that were not previously incorporated in the ordinance. The revisions addressed a range of sign types and standards. Crystal Park 1 and 3 are located along sign map line B to the east. Line B is shown as the pink line in this slide. Line B on the zoning ordinance, Article 13, map 34-1, known as the sign map, cites specific sections of the zoning ordinance that cover placements of signage above 40 feet, sign illumination standards, and hours of illumination. There are no signs proposed with this site plan amendment, but any signs requested in the future would have to comply with the requirements of the current version of the ordinance, as well as the requirements of the sign map. Staff contacted the National Landing Bid, who was in support of this amendment, and provided a letter of support recently, a few days ago. Staff also contacted the Crystal City Civic Association, who responded with a letter that they were not in favor of the amendment, citing concerns that the applicant may construct more signage than is currently allowed, as well as stated during the site plan review process that the community had argued for more than average limits on signs and had accepted less in the way of community benefits to limit the number of signs. The Arlington Ridge Civic Association and Aurora Highlands Civic Associations associated themselves with the Crystal City Civic Association's comments. Staff does not have indication that the signage conditions that the applicant has requested were agreed to in concession for other community benefits at the time of site plan approval, originally in 1980, or at the time of the amendments that added these conditions in 2004 and 2006. At the time of approval for the condition for Crystal Park 1 and Crystal Park 3, staff recommended approval of the conditions since the requests were consistent with the sign guidelines for site plan buildings, as well as with other rooftop signs previously approved in the area. In addition, staff stated in both reports that since the rooftop signs faced a commercial area, they would not have a significant impact on the residential neighborhoods. The current signage conditions, as I mentioned, are more restrictive than the present signage allowances per Article 13 of the ordinance. As commercial buildings mature and market themselves for new tenants, it's important that building owners be able to avail themselves of signage permissions available to other similar buildings so as not to place themselves at a competitive disadvantage. Since the comprehensive amendments to the ordinance, site plan building owners have sought site plan amendments similar to this request to remove older, more restrictive language, which staff has supported so as to allow for fair administration of building signage. Specifically, there have been 7 site plan amendments approved related to rooftop signage language since 2019, with 2 more requests currently under review, including this one. As no new signs are proposed with this current site plan amendment, the request to remove the 2 aforementioned conditions is not anticipated to have an adverse impact on the community. Therefore, staff will recommend approval since this request is consistent with the zoning ordinance as it was amended specifically to streamline signage requirements, and the purpose of this amendment is to make the signage consistent with the current Arlington County zoning ordinance standards. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer questions when the time comes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. I think we also have the applicant who is here to make a presentation and prefers to make it standing. Welcome, Mr. Allman.
Good morning, board members, and thank you, Ms. Martin. I'm Matthew Allman. I'm a land use attorney with Venable in Tysons, and I'm here today representing JBG Smith. Ms. Martin's presentation already hit many of the key highlights, so I'm going to move as quickly as I can through our slideshow. And we could get that up on the screen. Great, thank you. So I'll just state at the outset that the request before you today is purely procedural. JBG Smith is not requesting any new rooftop signs with this proposal, nor are they proposing amendments to what is currently on the site. It is strictly a procedural change. So if we could advance actually forward to the slides with the picture. Yeah, we can skip that. Thank you. So I know you saw this image previously, as well as the site plan condition for the Crystal Park 1 building. I won't dwell on any of the details here, but I think you get a sense from the language that this was a very tenant-specific approval with very precise square footages and references to specific design drawings. And on the next slide, you see that's the same situation at Crystal Park 3, where you have a almost 20-year-old site plan condition, very, very customized for the tenant requesting it at that time. Next slide. So the situation at Crystal Parks 1 and 3 is not unique. In fact, it's very typical for these older buildings, and that's because of the way signage used to be regulated prior to 2012. Almost every sign had to come before the county board, and that resulted in these very customized tenant-specific signage approvals. Eventually, I think the volume of those submissions and just the fact of having a custom approval for every building became a little unwieldy, and that's why in 2012 the ordinance was amended to provide for a little more standard rules for everybody, introduce an administrative process, and generally provide a little more flexibility for the requests to come in, but also predictability by having just one set of rules that every owner could abide by. Those are all positive elements of the sign ordinance, in my view. The one sort of complication of the new system is that for buildings like Crystal Park, you might end up with a 20-year-old site plan condition that says one thing and the zoning ordinance that says something else. And they're not always perfectly in concert, which can complicate things if a new tenant comes in and wants to change the design. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary of what those rules are in the zoning ordinance, and I know Ms. Martin touched on some of those already. I think overall I would say the rules are designed to balance the need for commercial signage on the one hand but also protect those residential areas on the other and make sure that there's mitigation for view sheds and just generally being respectful of your surrounding property. Next slide. So the request before you, again, is purely procedural. It's just requests that those old site plan conditions be eliminated and move the buildings into the new, clearly into the new regulatory pathway of the zoning ordinance. And that has the effect of placing Crystal Parks 1 and 3 on an even footing with newer buildings that don't have those legacy site plan conditions, and helps improve the marketability of that office space. And again, no new signage is before you today, no modified signage is before you. We know that anything that a new tenant might want will still have to go to the zoning department and work their way through the zoning administrative review and satisfy all the criteria from the zoning ordinance. And finally, on the last slide, just leave you with just some examples from recent years of similar requests. Again, we know this is sort of a common situation that comes up with these older buildings, and just our firm alone, we probably have one of these a year or maybe every other year, where we have a tenant that comes in and wants something, and we have to go back and clean up these older site plan conditions. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Allman. I don't believe we have any commissions to speak on this item, so why don't we move to public speakers, Mr. Kushner?
All right, our first public speaker is John Musso, followed by Tracy Gabriel.
Good morning, members of the County Board. I'm John Musso, Government Affairs Manager at the Arlington Chamber of Commerce, and I would just like to say a few words requesting that the board accept and approve this applicant's request. In the midst of a historically high office vacancy rate, it is really important that we ensure that a lot of our commercial space is on solid playing fields in terms of marketability. And granting this request, which is, as noted in the presentation, has a lot of precedent since the adoption of the sign ordinance back in 2012, is a really simple and effective way to ensure that these buildings like Crystal Drive are in fact on an even playing field of being attractive to tenants, both existing ones and ones that can come in from Arlington to continue to and contribute to the business environment here. And as noted in Ms. Martin's presentation, this is a very straightforward request. This would not adversely impact the neighborhood. And so I think overall this is a very straightforward request that would really benefit the business environment of Crystal City and National London. So thank you very much, and I hope you vote to approve.
Thank you.
Our next and final speaker is Tracy Gabriel.
Good morning, Chair Dorsey and members of the County Board. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Tracy Saya Gabriel, President and Executive Director of the National Landing Business Improvement District. On behalf of the business community in Crystal City, Pentagon City, and Potomac Yard, the National Landing Bid expresses its strong support for amending the rooftop signage site plan conditions for Crystal Park 1 and 3. The National Landing Bid and our stakeholders champion a downtown in which well-designed identifying signage attracts and provides a platform for important commercial tenants that make National Landing a vibrant urban district. We believe that Arlington County's zoning ordinance's Article 13, which allows property owners to approve and modify rooftop signage administratively rather than through a more restrictive site plan conditions, is the best approach to updating signage while modernizing our skyline. Crystal Park 1 and 3 are mature commercial buildings, and improving their existing rooftop signage through an approved administrative process offers a more streamlined approach to updating an existing sign. The bid further supports this amendment as the applicant is not requesting any new signage, but is proposing necessary updates to an existing rooftop sign. Overall, the bid strongly endorses a more streamlined and flexible regulatory process in which signage can easily be updated rather than held under more restrictive site plan conditions. This improved and more reliable regulatory process will ensure that National Landing properties remain competitive and continue to support the attraction and retention of corporate office tenants in our growing downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gabriel. And now the discussion is with the board, and I'm going to ask our vice chair to start us off with a motion, please.
I'd love to do that, thank you. And I would like to move that we adopt the county manager's recommendation to adopt the ordinance, which is attached to the staff report dated September 14th, 2023, to approve a site plan amendment to revise condition language related to rooftop signs located at 2011 and 2231 Crystal Drive.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Karantonis. You want to start us off with any comments or questions?
I would. I don't have any questions, just a few comments. Colleagues, I was contacted by, or we have been contacted by 3 civic associations, Arlington Ridge, Aurora Highlands, and Crystal City, as mentioned. I don't know that their letter is in the materials we got. I forwarded to you so that you have it. And I've reached out. I'm hoping to talk to at least a couple of the people who signed that letter. I'm the board member that was here in 2012 when this was first done, and we're trying to get this up, trying to get these buildings in compliant or conditions similar to what we did in 2012. Fully supportive. A couple of the things that the civic associations brought up, there are 3 main points. They were concerned about that the visible signs, they say large visible signs have a cost to the community. And they talked about a long history where we've had a lot of negotiations, and they're concerned that these negotiations are getting undone. And also, they don't like changing it to an admin approval from the county board instead. To the staff instead of the county board, feeling that it robs the community of a voice. And these are all the discussions we had in 2012. Mm-hmm. So that all of this is really sort of the discussions have been had. And if Ms. Martin, if you're able to quickly pull up the slide that is one of your backup slides on, it's got a list of everything that's been done with these 2 sites in the past. You can just see all of the times the signs have come before the board before we did this amendment. And I think, when I talk to the Civic Association presidents, just kind of go, yeah. I mean, that's just a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of effort for something that really, I think, shouldn't take that much time and effort. We've got a lot of issues before us, and the square inches of a sign, et cetera, should not be really one of them that we spend a whole lot of time on. So I am, again, very pleased to support this motion, and I will talk to our Civic Association folks, and hopefully they will come to agree and understand that we had all of this discussion back in 2012. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you. Happy to support this. I do have the staff report with respect to the second of the 3 concerns that Ms. Garvey identified is persuasive that it was not all with the original site plan, and there are 2 site plans involved. So that's very helpful on the staff report on that piece of it. I guess with respect to the first concern, don't know if staff could describe and the visibility of the signs. I don't know and didn't quite get from the staff report. This is not, as the applicant made clear and in the staff presentation, this is not a specific request, but what would be allowable under this, the signs that are currently present would be allowable, as well as there's no restriction on the part of the building. There's part that faces National Airport. Under the zoning ordinance, would there be restrictions on which of the 4 sides of these 2 buildings signs would be allowed? Or there are limitations, I believe, in Article 13 on height. Can you speak a little bit to whether any side would be possible for these signs, and just confirm that are height and light limitations, if you could?
So line map B, that's the pink line that I showed on the slide earlier, and I can pull this back up, but that's facing federal lands. There are going to be those hours of illumination. So there's going to be a max luminance for signs above 40 feet, and that's going to be 200 whatever the unit is for that. I apologize for not knowing the correct term.
Per square meter, which is
What was it?
candelas per square meter.
Candelas per square meter, thank you. There's hours of illumination standards for these signs facing that east. Let me share this slide.
Thank you for helping go back through this for me.
There we go. Okay, so any of these signs facing this pink line, which currently the signs that exist on the two buildings do not face that pink line, they're facing Crystal Drive. And I'll pull these up. This is the view of the building from Crystal Drive, of Crystal Park 1, and this is of Crystal Park 3. So these are both not facing those federal lands. And any request for a new sign is going to be reviewed by the zoning administrator or the zoning department to fit the requirements of Article 13 as it exists now, but these sign map requirements will also apply.
Sure. Thank you. That's very helpful. I just was, as you were working through this slide, I was making sure I had absorbed all the pieces of the letter that we have received. And this slide and your explanation satisfy me on the first of the three concerns. Big picture, it's aligning with our zoning ordinance, and that seems the right direction to me in this case. Thanks.
Hey, Ms. Talento.
I actually want to follow up on what Mr. DeFerranti was asking about. And I apologize for not submitting this to staff in advance. As Ms. Garvey shared the letter today, I had seen it. And I understand the competitiveness of our commercial market today. I'm not looking to, I think that it's important to align our zoning ordinances across the county. But I also think it's important to make sure our residents understand what the impacts are of that. And I'm not sure what they are. So can you provide some clarity? In the current zoning ordinance plan that was adopted in the last few years that we're trying to now, make it the same for everyone, are there time restrictions on light illumination?
There are.
Could you share those with me, please?
Yes, give me 1 second. So for illumination, signs placed above a height of 40 feet cannot be lighted between midnight and 8 a.m. Those hours can be modified by the county board if it's demonstrated that the impacts might be mitigated.
Okay, so if a sign is lit at a time in a community, they can come, provide feedback, concerns, and there can be some mitigation to address that, were that to be an issue at a point, right? There's an opportunity for mitigation. Is that what you just said?
If there were a sign that weren't in compliance, that could be addressed.
Okay, but the current code is at 10 p.m. The signs go off and they come back on at 8 a.m.
If they're lit.
If they're lit, okay. So they wouldn't be lit overnight.
Not per our current ordinance.
And then the next question is on the view shed of the GW Parkway. And I just want to get clarity on this. It is possible that there may be signage with our new ordinance, if we approve this today, where a sign might be visible from the view shed?
Signs, excuse me, signs facing line B, facing federal lands would be possible, but they would have to meet those requirements of the sign map. And if they couldn't meet those requirements, then they wouldn't.
Okay. So I was trying, okay, so what are the requirements of the sign map? And you don't have to be like this piece right here, like this, because I was trying to read the ordinance and there's talking about like how it needs to be some like tree coverage or something to that extent. I'm just trying to understand these concerns, right? Like, it's okay, and they would have to meet these requirements? Like, I'm sorry, I apologize for my ignorance, but I'm really, are you talking about the ones on this slide right now?
So there's a multiple requirements they're going to have to meet. They're going to have to meet these sign map line B requirements as well as all the other requirements of Article 13.
Right.
Anthony Busarelli might have some more.
No, that's okay. Right. So that makes sense to me, but they could be visible from the view shed. Like the point is right now you can't have signs that impact the view shed on GW Parkway. Is that correct? Right now, under the current plan, signs are not allowed to impact the view shed.
per the approved conditions that are proposed to be eliminated, there would not, so with the current conditions, if they are not removed, there would not be any new signage for the rooftops on Crystal Park 1 and 3.
Okay.
So they would not be permitted right now due to those restrictive signage conditions that the applicant is proposing to remove. Yes.
Okay. But if we adopt the ordinance today, there may be a possibility that there would be permissions, but there would be these certain requirements that they have to meet.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. Like everybody else. Okay, I just want to understand that, right?
Building next door.
Just because I think it's important for the residents to understand, to be clear, and there was a comment that they weren't clear, and I wasn't clear based on the report that I reviewed. I apologize, I didn't review this presentation in advance. So thank you for that. I just want to make sure that as we move in this direction, that we're at least very clear as to what the possible expectations are. And I think that during these situations that sometimes we just have to find a compromise in understanding the needs of our market and the impact to our tax revenue, making sure that we stay competitive, and understanding that we are in a very urban environment, and so how we can mitigate those challenges. So thank you for helping me understand that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you. So one question I have for you. So when we use the ordinance to approve signs and buildings over 40, so is there any, so if somebody, how do we communicate that? So, a big sign on a tall building, and I'm going back to the 2012 process, which, I didn't enjoy from this position, but from there, and it was not very enjoyable. It was an extremely, friction-rich conversation back then. So there were many safeguards, and there was, all this concern about not over-illuminating places, being respectful to natural resources. In this particular case, it's kind of moot because right across from there is the national airport, and there is no more illuminated speck on this region than the national airport. But can you tell me how staff and the administrative process engages with stakeholders in these cases? Do they get a call and say, hey, we have a signage approval here? Do you have anything to say about that? Is it something that we could negotiate? Is it something that is offensive?
Good morning, and thank you, Board Member Karantonis, for that question. My understanding, right, in our collaboration with zoning staff, is that if an applicant is looking to pursue permissions for signage under an administrative approval, there really is no public review process. There is no direct engagement with the stakeholders. I would offer until, a sign is approved and installed, and if stakeholders have concerns, as Ms. Martin said earlier, if there's a belief and or opinion that there might be a violation, they could always contact the zoning office for further investigations and inspections. But there really isn't a public process, and that was one of the outcomes really out of the 2012 ordinance amendments, was to really institutionalize an administrative approval process rather than having each one come forward on a case-by-case basis.
No, I understand that, and I didn't mean to have a public process and have all this interference with a straightforward administrative process that applies to everybody, by the way, the same way. And this isn't, an equitable, everybody is the same, equal for the law. It's just a courtesy of sometimes saying, look, this is a sign that's coming up, and because I feel sometimes, one of the paragraphs in the April communication, dated in April 23, communication that we got from the Civic Association was, well, we are concerned about converting Crystal Drive into Times Square, which is an exaggeration, of course, but it conveys a message. I, by the way, think that especially Crystal Drive is evolving in terms of illumination and night presence very favorably. This is a very decent delivery of night presence, not at all offensive in my personal opinion. I was just referring to just a, transactional courtesy to say, look, this is coming. Do you have any objections?
Yeah, I don't believe that's part of our operating procedures currently. I think there'd be some questions or challenges in terms of who those stakeholders are, but certainly something we can take back and just ensure that.
It's just customer service, not really procedural. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you just explain what you were asking of Mr. Fusarelli?
I was referring to as following. So I have myself experienced, for example, issues with the sign of the Sheraton Hotel in Pentagon at the end of Columbia Pike. Sometimes the sign was, flickering. It was really a problem. There is a neighborhood just underneath. So it was refreshing to know that there is somebody on the other end we could call and discuss that. And, through the just normal interaction with staff and with the owner of the sign, this was all resolved many, many times. So there is a customer service environment to that and a good attitude to this without having to introduce an approval process every time in a public process. I mean, if we read the language of the two site plan conditions that they're proposed to be removed, and I support that. They prescribe even the company that built them and the company that proposed them, Jack something, and etc., which is bogus, and it creates an absolutely nightmare of governance here. I fully appreciate that we removed in 2012 this arbitrarity. But I just want to convey the idea that, if there is some really big concern, there is somebody to talk to, and there's always an open ear for
So
things.
if I could just clarify a little bit, if there is a problem with an existing sign, if there's an issue of a violation, you can always contact the zoning office for enforcement. What I think Mr. Fusarelli was saying is that there is no pre-approval public engagement process.
Yeah. So I'll say for my part, I strongly support the work that you alluded to, Mr. Schwartz at the beginning, and Ms. Martin mentioned in her remarks as well about thinking about this more broadly than just this. We're spending a fair amount of time talking about the concerns that were articulated by Civic Association members who maybe perhaps by not being here speaking on it this morning have come to realize that the current process that we have cannot stand, that we have these conditions which were born in a different era of governance and are so specific as to be incredibly inequitable in allowing commerce to sort of happen the way we want it to happen now. And the whole notion of having the administrative approval by the zoning administrator of sign plans, to me, is a welcome improvement from the way Arlington used to operate. I can't remember the last time we had a complaint or issue about signs in Arlington, and whereas that used to be sort of the pickleball of its time back in the day. So the fact that we have moved to a level of efficiency and seeming satisfaction with that, to me, is ample evidence the current process is an improvement and ought to be standardized across everywhere. So I'm happy to support this, but also would encourage Mr. Schwartz to have staff figure out as soon as they possibly can how to address this holistically. Ms. Martin, I think this is your first time presenting an item before the board?
I've presented a recessed meeting before, a few of those, but this is my first Saturday.
First Saturday, all right. So well, that'll count. You did a great job, but I think it's not the best use of your talents to have you looking at these ad hoc sign things. We want to take care of this all at once so that you can handle all the other elements that Mr. Fusarelli has on his extensive work plan. Any other comments? All right, we'll move to a vote on this item and Ms. Garvey's motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it 5-0. With that, do we have any other items to come before the board this morning?
We do not.
Mr. Kushner.
We do not.
All right, so therefore the board is in recess until Tuesday, September 26th at approximately 3 p.m. Thank you.